Hello. It's time for a crisis. This is Crisis. Crisis with a K, as known throughout the comics-loving internet, and from the website, crushingcrisis.com, and the YouTube channel, Crushing Crisis. If you followed it back when it had my name, now it's just a little bit easier. We're trying to make the brand universe a little bit simpler here in 2025. I'm here with you today live because it is the third week of new releases of New Comic Book Day, and I'm going to just talk about all of them like a total crazy person. I have read over 40 polls this week, and I'm going to go through all of them and even talk about the books that I didn't pull, why I didn't pull them, and if you might like them. So my whole goal for this stream is to help you find the comic books that you love. I know that not everybody is reading as widely as me, and that's fine. You're a comic book lover if you read one comic book a week, one comic book a month, but I would like to help you find that one comic book a month, or maybe even a sneaky second or third comic book a month. So just to remind everybody how this goes, at the beginning, I'm going to say hi to some folks in the chat. Then I'm going to give a little talk, a little monologue. I would call it a late night monologue, but for me, it's 10 in the morning here in New Zealand. But I'm going to talk a little bit about DC Ultimate, or no, the other way around, DC Absolute versus Marvel Ultimate. And then I'm going to give you my power rankings of all of my top 10 comic series so far this year. It's been 3 weeks. Why not have a top 10? And then we will go through all of my individual polls, and I'll pull up your comments on them too, as well as your questions throughout. So before we get started, 2 reminders. One is, this is all supported by my patrons. Many of you were incredibly generous to join my Patreon last week. I really appreciate it. I have a $1 level and a $2 level, and that's it for now. There might be more special video levels later as the year goes on, but first let's establish that I actually can wake up in the morning and do this for like a month or two before we start putting that horse in front of that cart. So if you go over to Patreon, there's no perks related to the YouTube channel right now, but if you do become a patron, that means you get access to all of the guides on Crushing Crisis. So $1 patrons get all of the X-Men related guides, plus a lot of extra special treats. And if you're a $2 patron right now, you get everything. I said last week I was going to be launching a new Hellish guide. I didn't quite get it done last week, but it's going to launch this week, and it will be a reading guide to magic. So if you saw me on Near Mint Condition last week doing a perfect mapping for magic, this is the guide that corresponds to that. And one more thing before we get started, just a reminder, I'm going to do 2 Ask Me Anythings. It's going to be about comics or anything else, and I'm going to do them once after I go through my top 10 series, and then again at the end of the stream. In the middle, I'm really going to try to focus on the new comics because I know that that is the main topic. So you're going to have 2 chances to quiz me about anything. New Zealand, I don't know what my favorite place to get a cheesesteak by when I lived in Philadelphia. Anything you can think of is fair game. So let me say hi to a few people in the chats. And so, oh my gosh, everybody's just saying so many nice things. Moonin says, good evening to you, Moonin. Something I realized last week is I don't always say the person who gave the comment. So if you're just like listening and washing dishes, which is a lot of how I watch YouTube, you won't know. So I'm going to try to say everybody's names this week. Rising Phoenix Railroad, hello to you. They say, hello, everyone. One of my longtime social media friends and one of the biggest super family fans on the planet, Kenneth Crayley Jr., says, hey, everyone. Tiago Pessoa says, hi, greetings to all. James with my motto, slogan of the year, resolve, repair, recover. It's kind of like the resist red triangle in X-Men, which they all use to resist psychic attacks. But for me, it's just to remind myself not to just throw things on the ground and start screaming as soon as one thing doesn't go my way. This morning, I did a speed test on my internet before we started because we learned our lesson that first week. And the speed was like 0.4 megabits down. I'm like, well, that's not going to work. Did I throw anything on the floor and try to make it explode like Master Shake? No, I reset my modem. See? Growth. That's growth. We have You Know Who's Expose, which is my dear friend Tyler, who used to co-host this week's in X with me, saying, hey, everyone, perhaps we can tempt Tyler to make an appearance after I've put the horse in front of the cart. Neil Pereira says, good morning to all. Please, if I say things wrong, always correct me. I'm the prince and princess of mispronouncing names all rolled into one. Dr. Elevator waves hello. Chris Brogan, who I was just in the chat with, I believe, yesterday on Omnidog's Vault, saying hi. Okay. Wayne Slade, who is there chatting with me all the time on Blue Sky. I'm crushing comics on Blue Sky and Twitter. And if you just want the personal whining about politics and stuff, that is Crisis with a K. And a few others, Ryan Bragg, Saz Mirth, Eric Garza. I'm so blessed to know that I just have these people, these friends, these names that I recognize on the internet that come and say hi. And you know who expose, ready to live stream whenever I'm ready to put him in the game. Vision 940 for the 3rd week running, me and you both. And Zero Zakku saying, hey, Krisis. All right. Jacob Millenbach, who loves talking mapping. Jacob, I am not going to reveal the mapping of the Gambit Omnibus. He asks what would be the mapping of the Gambit that would contain all of his volumes, including his solo series. We got into that in the chat a little bit on some kind of stream. Maybe this one, maybe a Near Mint Condition stream, but Gambit is soon going to be up for vote as one of our upcoming Map My X's on Near Mint Condition. So I'm not revealing that just yet. And plus, I have to finish the Gambit guide. But first, I have to finish the Magic guide. Okay. So if you have some AMAs for me, now's the time to start thinking. I'm going to do my little monologue, and then we're going to do our top 10 power rankings, and then we're going to get to an AMA. So my monologue this week is about Absolute DC versus, what is it called? Ultimate Marvel. Now, to be fair, Absolute DC has a grand total of, 10 issues out right now, as opposed to Marvel, which has had a whole year. So over 36 issues from now 5 different series with the addition of Ultimate Wolverine this week, which we're going to be talking about at the very end of the alphabet. But I wanted to talk about them compared to each other, how they contrast with each other, how they're similar to each other. So Marvel has had this Ultimate Universe idea before, right? But Marvel, previously to Ultimate Universe in 2000, really was not known for their Elseworlds. Age of Apocalypse was like the big Marvel Elseworld that had ever happened. And then, of course, there are amalgam comics with DC in 1996 and 97, but that was really just about it. Marvel was not known for their dalliance in other places. They had What If for that, and that was What If was for, and What If did not have a long-term continuity. They also had Exiles to explore it, but they didn't have a universe, a consistent Elseworld, the way that DC had been doing many, many times in the 1990s. But Marvel was in trouble at the end of the 1990s, which is where the Ultimate Universe came from. They had to do something. And so they were like, well, what if we try to make a universe that's, cool for the youths? Well, it was a little bit more complex than that. But the idea was to kind of strip heroes back to the simplicity of their origins and their powers, and to tell a story that had no heavy baggage, that people could jump right onto, and that streamlined origins and character personalities. The thing that happened, though, was the early 2000s. It was a cynical time. This line launched just, not that long prior to 9/11, and then all the things that came after that. And then a little writer named Mark Miller came along, who has a very pessimistic way of voicing his characters and viewing the world of superheroes. And that colored the whole Ultimate Universe for the rest of the Ultimate Universe. So not only was it grounded in realism, it was actually quite pessimistic about what role heroes would serve in the world. Now, that universe all came to an end in 2015. Along the way, DC did many other Elseworlds. They had your Earth 1, which were a series of disconnected graphic novels that also did a very grounded, low super take on their universe. They had Earth 2. They had Deceased. I mean, DC just puts this stuff out all the time. So for DC, it's just another day when there's another Elseworld. So we've got this new Ultimate Universe from Marvel right now. It has a very specific conceit from Jonathan Hickman, who was there at the end of the original Ultimate Universe. And the conceit is that what if the maker, who is the Reed Richards of the original universe, went back to start a new one with an Earth as similar to 616 as he could begin with, and he just plucked all of the really significant heroes either out of the time stream by preventing them from getting bitten by spiders, or preventing them from being hit by trucks of radioactive garbage, or he gets them on his side. So really, it's about control. It's not about the loss of hope so much, but Maker's version of control does leave people relatively hopeless, but he's a kind fascist. He's taking care of things well. And the inciting event at the beginning of this new Ultimate Universe is, what if Maker kind of got put in a bubble for a while and he loses that control, and there starts being a cascade of people realizing that they have a bigger role in the world, including Spider-Man finally getting bit by a spider. That's really cool. It's a great concept. It tells you exactly what the universe is about. We've got people discovering their powers, but at very different points in their life than they used to discover them. And we have this ticking clock because the Maker's going to come back. That's a really good story hook for the universe, regardless of how much you do or don't like the books. Now let's talk about for a second DC Absolute, right? DC has never really said we've got one Elseworld that's like a primary storytelling Elseworld with all ongoing continuity with the books to each other. That's actually pretty unusual for DC, unless we're talking about a whole sub-universe like Milestone or Wildstorm, right? So they said that's what we're doing. And it all branched out of Absolute Power, their big events last year, which at the end of which Darkseid, just Darkseid. I say Darkseid because I read it first and I was like, he's a seed of darkness. Darkseid would surely be far too literal. No, it's Darkseid. So Darkseid decides basically to just F off and pretty much totally copy the maker's homework from Marvel and start his own universe. But Darkseid starts with something in a way much more specific and in a way much more vague. Darkseid's like, what if there was just no hope? What if there was nothing really to look forward to in this universe? What if we removed all the things that gave these heroes hopeful outlooks on the world? Diana being raised by the Amazons, Clark being raised by Alfred, Superman getting here as a baby and being raised by the Kents. But he does end, so it also is a very low super world. In all three of those books, we've really not seen anything super. We've seen lots of things militaristic. Now, how do these two universes compare and which is better? Because the other thing they have in common is they're using the top creators in all of comics, right? Ultimate Universe has got Jonathan Hickman at the helm and Dennis Camp, who's very quickly up and coming in indie books as a creator to watch. On the Absolute side, we have Eisner winner Kelly Thompson. We've got Scott Snyder, who you just can't keep away from Batman, no matter how hard you try. And Jason Aaron, who was a major architect of the Marvel Universe for just about 20 years, right? Big, heavy hitters. But what's the real difference? To me, I think, and this is a tough one, but I think Ultimate Universe is better right now. And I know we're only a few books in, but it's not, it was even better 3 issues in. And here's why. Ultimate Universe has that really clear mission statement. We're finding our powers. We've got to stop the maker, right? Also, I love the conceit that every issue in the Ultimate Universe is about a month of storytelling. It prevents them from getting too decompressed. It's saying we're going to tell a complete story in this issue. It's going to continue, but you can pick up anywhere. You can appreciate anything. You really don't have to have all of the continuity memorized. It's a very specific way of making comics that nobody is really doing right now in their shared universes, which is saying like each issue is really going to matter a lot to the story. Because of that, I find my reads in the Ultimate Universe so satisfying. Even books that I don't traditionally think I would ever pick up, which really I never pick up any alternate universes at all. Meanwhile, on the DC side, we're 3 issues deep into all the books, and they're just telling the same origin story. It's the same storytelling we're used to in the regular DC universe, and there's no like compelling, what is this about? Like the heroes are emerging because the heroes are emerging, but there's no sense that they're emerging because Darkseid slipped up, because it's time for a little bit of hope. There's none of that. So I'm liking the books. I love Absolute Wonder Woman. Absolute Superman is, well, it might be my #1 book. You have to stay tuned for the power rankings, but I really feel the DC universe is lacking that compelling raison d'etre at the very middle that tells me why I'm reading every book. It feels to me like they're all going to go on for an arc or two, and they're going to be traditionally told arcs, and then we're going to get some kind of event that happens in a year or two, and then it's going to cross over with the main DC universe because they're all flustered. It just feels a little bait and switchy. It feels a little bit normally. It feels like the main thing there is the pedigree of the creators, whereas the Ultimate Universe truly, to me, feels like something new, different, bold, surprising, different kinds of storytelling, but still hitting that nostalgia button over and over again every time they pop up a new character that you might recognize, but remixing them in interesting ways. We have Storm and Moon Knight as the main characters in Black Panther. That's pretty cool. And I will talk about Ultimate Wolverine later today. So if we look at these two universes next to each other, what are they? They do kind of share a lack of hope, but Marvel's Ultimate Universe is about the campaign to win hope back and has some very specific storytelling rules. The Absolute Universe is about not having any hope, and that looks like all there is on the horizon. And I am not a big fan of grimdark DC. I never really liked DC in the 2000s. I don't really like DC's heroes being heavy. I like DC's heroes being bold. So even though I like the individual books, I think Ultimate Marvel has the edge here. And if DC doesn't figure out what this line is about, it's just going to be another one of their disposable Elseworlds in a couple of years that just happen to have a lot of great creators, just like Earth 1 did. So that's our moment of crisis today. Do you agree? Disagree? Let's just take a quick look because we got to keep flying, y'all. Oh my gosh, people are starting with the AMAs now. I didn't think about that, how far up I was going to have to scroll to figure out all of that. Just a comment on my Darkseid versus Darkseid. Called him who knows which one, Darkseid or Darkseid. This is Logan Wayne says, I called him Darkseid or Side until Superman, the animated series came along, or maybe it's Justice League Unlimited. I don't know, it's one of those. Probably means Logan had been calling him Darkseid and then was corrected by the cartoon. James Abel says, from what I see so far, really looking forward to Absolute Martian Manhunter, which I believe that is by Dennis Camp, who will be pulling double duty in both of the alternate Elseworld universes. Pretty amazing there. Bunkmaster B on comics says Ultimate takes hit right now, got me off the strength of the Ultimates. Once Camp goes on to Absolute Martian Manhunter, different story. Camp isn't leaving Ultimates, is he? Gosh, that would be horrible. Camp is one of the few people who can like tell a Hickman style story without feeling like he's just doing a Hickman imitation. Hey, Unstoppable Bar, coming to me from pretty far around the world from New Zealand. Sucks I never get to join these streams because they're so late. Now, I mean, I feel that way often, but stopping by to say hi to everybody. I did that on Omnidog's Vault yesterday, and then I just stayed for the whole stream. You know whose expose says, agree. Absolute Universe lacks a central theme at the moment, other than, as I said, a lack of hope. And I'm not sure how Darkseid's presence created that universe. Well, did you read the DC All-In special? It was a really good one-shot. The front half of it was all about what the current status quo is with the Watchtower, which is really important to all the DC books. And then the back half of it was where does Darkseid F off to and why? And actually, I think it really explains the universe well. And I don't think people realized that it was the origin story of the Ultimate Universe because it was just the All-In special and it wasn't like the Absolute special. So you should go back and read that. Really good issue. Really, really good script. Really, really good art. Unstoppable Bar is reading 26 ongoing comics right now. Absolute Wonder Woman is top 3 best series from what I'm reading. Incredible stuff. I love Kelly Thompson. I love Hayden Sherman. I think it's a little too decompressed for me to be in my top 10. I like books that move, but I do really like it. I'm reading 45 comics just this week, so my pull list is a little bit bigger, but 26 is a lot of ongoing for a regular human being who's not trying to have a weekly show full of content. 26 ongoing comics a month is plenty of comic books. Okay. I see some AMAs coming in. That is wonderful because, because I'm going to do my power rankings and then we're going to do Ask Me Anything. I'll try to get as many questions as I can, but then we got to just keep moving. We got to keep moving. Always moving forward like a shark. So, and remember, AMA can be anything. It can be about music, can be about my favorite pizza. I don't know. Truly Ask Me Anything. I feel like I so often went on other people's channels, so frequently in near mint condition, and I really can only go so deep into Crisis lore there. And I love Omnidog lore. I love the deep lore of all the things we know about Jess. So I'm trying to establish some deep lore. And then those of you who have been purchasing since issue number 1, which is now a real collector's item because I'm not republishing it. The internet was too bad in that one. You will know the deepest of deep lore, right? And please tell me if the internet gets funny. Like I said, I started right at the beginning, but I have many things that I can use to influence that now. So now we're going to do my 2025 comic series power ranking. And I have a new setup here. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so here's my top 10 comic series so far of the year. And I have a minute to talk. Oh no, with the banner up, you can't see. Hold on. With the banner up, I didn't think about this. You can't see the timer. Well, you know what? We're just going to put the timer right here. There you go. Lessons learned for next week. Okay, here we go. Oh, but then it's going to be, okay, we're just not going to have a timer? I don't know. How about we take off the banner? I learned that self-producing is hard, y'all. That's what I learned. Okay, let's try that one more time. So here's my power ranking of my favorite 10 series so far this year. You've had a chance to look at it for a while. It's Jed McKay's Avengers. I don't know if this is going to hang in there. It's kind of fun. It's toyetic. I like it. But right now it's really up there because Farhad Karami is one of my favorite artists in comic right now. And I'm addicted. Number 9, is this cheating? This book originally came out like 6 years ago, but it's getting a physical release weekly right now. I read it on Global Comics. We're going to be talking about it later because it's out this week. I freaking love it. Amazing art, great protagonist. We'll get there. Welcome to the Maynard, still here from last week. A Disney-fied adventure through a magical hotel that I am addicted to, as is Batman Dark Patterns from last week. Dan Waters working with Hayden Sherman, who you all know and love from Absolute Wonder Woman. But then we've got some new entries. Storm with a bolt. Storm number 4 was amazing this week. I cannot wait to talk to you about it later in the show. Then we have The New Gods. That's right, Bunkmaster B. It is in my top 10 comics of the year. I think Cagle, the artist here, Evan Cagle, is having a moment, and we're seeing a new breakout star. He was great already, but he is greater now. Next, another one we're going to be talking about. I'm out of time, so I gotta be quick. The Nice House by the Sea. This comic has become my entire personality over the course of the last 2 weeks, and I cannot wait to share that personality with you when we talk about it later, because it was a release this week. And then last week, you saw me how much I love Living Hell by Caitlin Yarsky. I think it's one of the most bold and perfectly paced acts of cartooning I've seen in quite some time. Number 2 was last week's number 1, Absolute Superman. So what's number 1 now, y'all? It is Kelly Sue DeConnick on FML. And we're going to be talking about it later because I am obsessed with this comic. Okay, there you go. So now we're going to do some AMA. I hope you got some questions in. And then we're going to talk about my reviews of every single comic that was on the pull list this week. Okay, are we ready? So let's do some AMA. I'm going to go bottom to top so that way I can just tell when I'm running out. Okay, Foxhound says, I apologize if you've answered this already, but what made you move overseas? You know, Edwin asked this last week and I said it was a future story, but we'll kick off with it this time. I'll do little pieces of it every time somebody asks. At that time in 2017 in the United States, my daughter, Kid Crisis, was just about to be school age for the first time. And I'd kind of outgrown the house that I was in. I knew that I wanted to move into a different house, possibly in a different school district. And so we were just starting to think about that. And the opportunity came to move to New Zealand. And I'd really seriously been looking at moving to Canada. I was practicing my French. I was ready to do it. But the New Zealand opportunity came and it just was one of those perfect cadences where it was like easy to break. It was like a little score mark down the middle of the Kit Kat. And we just broke off a piece. And then we moved to New Zealand. I think I could have put a little more planning into that. I could have learned a little bit more about New Zealand. I believe my initial questions were, do they have the hard cheeses I like? And can people have gay same-sex marriage there? Those were my only 2 questions. I'm like, wow, if that and probably abortion access too. I'm a big leftist. This is going to come out in the deep lore. And when I found out those things, I'm like, yeah, let's go to New Zealand. Could I have maybe asked a little bit more, or took a brief lesson on the civics of New Zealand? Possibly. But there you go. That's why. Jarn Paul says, what silvery book behind me next to DC Finest? Double stacking. I believe I talked about this on the Hidden Week 1 show. This is Aztec Ace, which is a complete collection of an indie series by Doug Munch that I kickstarted, but you can actually get this physical book. It was a Dark Horse release. It's in my to read pile, but that's pretty hefty. So it's going to be a while before I get there. News Pooey Channel says, what is a book I did not previously enjoy, but later changed my mind on? Similarly, was there a comic I previously loved and lost passion for on a further reread? Oh, you know, these are always hard for me. I'm looking at my shelf because I usually have my database to tell me these things because I'm, as a person that almost certainly has ADHD, I'm not really good with object permanence. So it's really hard for me to remember these things off the top of my head unless it's like a canned answer that I always give. You know, I think there's some authors that I warm up to over time. And so at first I'll be like, oh, it's the same tricks they always use. And then over time, I'm like, oh, you know what? This book actually is more than just that. I would think, you know, and an example of that is Jeff Lemire on the Terrifics on DC. I didn't really like it at the beginning. And I was like, oh, just more Jeff Lemire. Actually, or did no, he wrote it first. And then over time, I was like, you know what, though? Jeff Lemire's ticks and his usual antics are great on this. But, you know, ultimately, it's hard for me to just think of these things off the top. And the comic I previously loved and lost the passion for, I wouldn't just say a comic, but I would say Al Ewing. I think Al Ewing, he needs a long vacation. His comics are feeling really belabored right now. Even Thor just feels not tight, not vital. I feel like he just feels so worn ragged right now. So sorry that wasn't specific enough. I would need to go into the database to get really, really specific. What is my favorite Otis Redding song? I mean, I got it, I guess, sitting on the dock. I don't know. Again, something I have a database for. I have a huge iTunes still. I use iTunes and MP3, screw streaming. And I have like over 130,000 tracks. So I'd have to go in and see what my top rated one is. Questions. I would love to hear opinion on Immortal Thor. I just teased that, says Ryan Wilson. I consider it one of my top reads, but I think there's too many plots. I'm going to talk about it later in my polls, so I don't want to totally spoil that. But I think Ewing is so far down the rabbit hole or possibly up his own bunghole that he's overcomplicating everything. And the stories that are about stories are getting not fun to read. I don't have a problem with a big cast, but trim it down, find the center. I'm a really big who is it for proponent. And even as somebody who really likes Thor and Asgard stuff, I'm starting to wonder who it is for. Neil Pereira asked, Peter, how long did it take to pack, move countries, and unpack the books? I had to move books and shelves just to a different room, and it nearly broke me. Well, it nearly broke me. I had less than 14 days ultimately to pack everything. There was like a sort of preparing phase, but when it really came down to packing, and most of that was just wrapping up my books, which many of you have seen on this channel in my originally season 1, the unwrapping. Then the actual, we had movers, because when you do international moves, they have to have like a really firm inventory of everything. They have to know what's in every box in case boxes get inspected by customs. So that actually took 2 days. And then the unpacking here, truth be told, I'm not totally unpacked. I mean, the books are unpacked, but I was in my garage the other day and there are boxes that I have not opened since 2017. So the answer, I believe, is infinity. All right, I'm going to look at a couple more AMAs just from a little earlier, and then we're going to move on to new comics. Which artists would I like to see a biographical Gianna of a la Bowie or Miles Davis? Here's that Bowie book by the All Reds. Who would I want to write and draw? Well, of course, I'd want to see Madonna. She had a script for her own movie, and then she got sick and wanted to do the celebration tour, and so it never got released. I think Madonna should have it adapted to a graphic medium. I think the All Reds are amazing for that stuff. But Madonna, I think Nicola Scott would be amazing on, because she draws beautiful Italians with beautiful hair. But yeah, of course I would say Madonna. Why would I not say Madonna? I don't know if there's a graphic novel of the Runaways, like Joan Jett and the Runaways, but I feel like I really like that Runaways movie that had Kristen Stewart in it. I think it's actually pretty fun. And I would love to read a graphic novel version of that. So there you go. Okay. I am going to okay. I think we made it to the top. So that was my first AMA. If you have more questions, save them for later, because I'm not going to scroll all the way back up. I will let you know when to keep sending them a little bit later on. And as a reminder, you can find me on crushingcrisis.com. I cover all the new releases ahead of the show. And then you can go and see. I don't just have 60 seconds there. So if I really want to go off, I go off. I mean, sometimes I write 500 words about one book that I haven't even read yet, but it's like catch you up on like, why does the book exist? Who is it for? Where can you start this arc? Is there a comic guide for it? So go and check that out if you have not been on Crushing Crisis lately, and you will see. Okay, let me set up. Hold on, I want to say hello to Larry's Library. A fantasy Jimmy Page bio would be great, or a whole Zeppelin bio, right? In the style, honestly, I would not hate if, who is this? Insight Comics just commissioned like a series of these of all like classic rock. That would be really, really fun. Mamas and the Papas, Janis Joplin, Jefferson Airplane, Cream, Queen. I could go on and on. I think this format, of course, you have to find somebody as talented as Allred, which does not exist. So, I mean, you would have to be really careful picking those creator combos. Okay, let me set up for this next phase here and get my giant PDF of 60-ish total new releases on screen. And then let me hit that brand new sharing doohickey that I built, because I'm actually learning things. And share, and to the stage. There we go. So riddle me this, because I can't ever tell if I'm mirrored or not. If I look this way towards the screen, does it look like I'm looking towards the picture for you? Because last week I noticed I was looking and pointing away from the picture, and that was starting to drive me crazy. But I can't tell. So am I pointing at the picture right now? It's not anybody. Bueller. Somebody will tell me eventually. Okay. Well, I guess it's time. Oh wait, but I have a secret PDF that I make just of the credits, so I can actually tell you who these books are all by. Well, folks, I made it through my whole poll this week, so I got to read 2000 AD, which is my reward for reading my whole poll. So let's go. 2000 AD, if you don't know, it's a long-running since 1977 anthology series from the UK that has several stories, sometimes 4 or 5 per issue, and this is I'm just jumping right into it. Oh boy, hold on. Everything's slowing down. I have too many things open. Let's pause. I might need to get a new Mac this year. It might need to happen. Let's quit. It's just these PDFs are so huge. But let's quit some stuff and try it again. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the credits and everything. Okay. I mean, I've got quite a spaceship console here showing all of this stuff at once, and I think my computer's starting to freak out. The first thing that will have to get cut, unfortunately, would have to be the countdown, but let's try to continue. Okay, so this had 5 stories in it. It had a Judge Dredd story, which I really loved. I have never read a Judge Dredd story before. I'm obsessed with Rob Williams. He's one of my favorite writers. I've always loved him. This was great. Like, I'm ready. It was part 2. It didn't even matter to me. I totally understood it. I had no idea that Judge Dredd was all about enforcing fascism and that, like, democracy was the bad guy. Totally into it. Then there was this fantasy story, Hawk the Slayer, that's like kind of the same thing, but in a fantasy world. And this like ruler chancellor person has been enchanted to be able to control everybody. And so they hunt down the person who put the enchantment on her originally and totally regrets it. Beautiful art. Totally loved it. Portals and Black Goo by John Tomlinson was kind of like a silly, like Frankenstein dark magic thing. I liked it, but it was part 3, and clearly I could have done better by reading the first 2 parts. And then there was a story about Oscar Wilde in the Old West, and then sort of like an aliens-esque story about a spaceship of aliens that were capturing people to bring them to a different place for a nefarious purpose, but in the guise of being a tourist barge. I loved it. I totally was into it. I love 2000 AD. And I can't believe this is the first time I've ever read a Judge Dredd story. I guess I must have like picked up a random 2000 AD issue that didn't have Judge Dredd before. Does that even exist? Who knows? But I totally love it. Okay. Moving on. Here is Action Comics from this week. This is Action Comics 1082. The creative team on this was, I can't tell you because nothing's working. Okay. This was by John Ridley. And you know what? I really didn't like this. So John Ridley's another one of these screenwriting carpetbaggers who's like up in our comics now. And that's fine, I guess. But this just was not interesting to me. Like, it's called Action Comics. And it was just all about Superman, like, confronting this guy who was a villain, but now he's not a villain anymore. Blah, blah, blah. I just found it so boring. The art was okay, I guess. But it just, we're coming right off of that Mark Waid multi-week series of this, and it was so good. And this was just so mild. It was a lot of talking, and I'm not convinced John Ridley actually knows who Clark Kent and Lois Lane are, because the voices felt really off for me. So this is part of that Superstars run where they're getting like the biggest of the big. Oh, that's my downloads folder. When they get the biggest of the big artists to do these books and write these books. And I just think it's kind of like a failure to launch. Like the Mark Waid 12-part, 13-part, however long it thing it was so much better than this. So like, why are we going back to this? The original Jason Aaron one was kind of a wet fart. The Gail Simone one was a very wet fart. Now we're going to have John Ridley farting on Action again. Action Comics is so much better at those like serialized things with a good backup story than it is with this. I just don't know what the hell they're doing. All right, I know what I did wrong. I was supposed to have a PDF and I just had a 1-page. All right, give me a second to get the correct credits so I can actually read you the credits of these books, because it's really important to me, whether the book sucked or not, to, where did it go? To credit the people who did them. Here we go. Here's my actual credits PDF. Okay, so that Superman book, the credits on that was John Ridley, writer, artist Inaki Miranda, colorist Eva La Cruz, and letters by Dave Sharp. Okay, I think we've got everything running now. Let's keep going. This is Alien Paradiso from Marvel. It is written by Steve Fox with Edgar Salazar, pencils Victor Nava, inkers, and Carlos Lopez on letters, or no, colors with Peter Nguyen on. Anyway, the Xenomorph's point of view, and Clayton Cowles on letters. I hate this. I hate it so much. But you know what? It's actually, this is one of those things that it's a me thing, and I don't think it's about the comic. For an Aliens comic, I have so little interest in seeing one group of people who I'm never going to care about again, who have one tenuous connection to the Nostromo or something, get mowed down by xenomorphs. They're on a resort. The resort has a drug deal going down. There's agents there, but they're undercover. But now there's xenomorphs, so everybody's going to have to work together. Cry me a river, Timberlake. I could not care less about this. But if this was just like a one-shot Alien black, white, and blood story with this same setup, I would love it. I just think personally, I don't see any point of following a bunch of disposable characters getting disposed of. Okay. Next, we have The Amazing Spider-Man 65-Point Death, because that's a normal, rational thing to name your issue. This is actually called Point Death because it is just an issue following Phil Coulson, who, surprise, is death now in the Marvel Universe, as he kind of tries to give Spider-Man a pep talk, because Spider-Man just watched so many people die in the vision that he had in his last challenge in issue 65 that he's just totally gone off the deep end and doesn't want to be a hero anymore. Written by Derek Landy, who's not the main writer, pencils by Kev Walker as a drop-in guest penciler, some inks by Wade Von Grohl. Raw Badger, and colors by Mattia Aikano and letters by Joe Caramanga. It's insulting that Marvel asked people to buy this. I'm insulted. I can't believe that they thought it was worth it to just have Spider-Man moping and charge like $4 or $5 for that. It's so bad. But there was a good monologue, which I'm going to read you in full so that you do not go and spend $4 or $5 for this stupid comic book. Death, the old Death, before Phil Coulson says, what happens after death depends on who you are. And I will answer that for you. But what I will say is that when your grandfather died, a version of you that only he knew vanished from the world. All the stories and thoughts and memories that he had of you, that only he had of you, are now gone forever. You should feel diminished. You should feel less than. This will happen to you over and over. But when you die, and you will join with all of those different versions, becoming not only the person you were, but the person you were to other people. People are scared of me, death, but they have no reason to be. I'm simply what awaits. I really thought that was actually a nice thought on the afterworld. Not worth $5. So next is the Anansi Boys. I'm not reading that. It's an adaptation of the book by Neil Gaiman. Next is the Astonishing Avengers. So actually, it's weird that we're doing it this early because this is a continuation of a series that ended this week. Good timing, Marvel, called Avengers Assemble. But this is following that kind of street team with the jackets from Avengers Assemble into their own adventures on Marvel Unlimited. So if you have Marvel Unlimited, you can just read it as it turns up every week. It's written by Steve Orlando with art from Francesco Archidiacono, colors from Carlos Lopez, letters from Travis Lanham. It was a little mild, y'all. It was the leather jacket Avengers playing soccer against the Impossible City Avengers from space, and then at the end something happens. That was the whole issue. But these are only about 12 pages worth of actual comic books, so about half an issue, and they show up for free on your Marvel Unlimited if you're a subscriber every week, so it's fine. I'm happy to see Steve Orlando still writing this team. I think he did a terrific job on the Avengers Assemble's book, and I'm happy to keep reading it weekly to see if this shorter format maybe keeps him from falling into his usual pitfalls of overwriting everything. Marvel is doing this thing where all of their in-continuity hero comics are labeled with the Astonishing adjective right now on Marvel Unlimited, and then all the ones that are like tenuous continuity, like It's Jeff and Alligator Loki, don't say Astonishing. This book is Spider-Man by Scott Aukerman, artist Julian Shaw, with colors from CC De La Cruz and letters from Joe Sabino. It's pretty bad. Scott Aukerman doesn't know who Peter Parker is, and it's just issue after issue of Spider-Man being all wrong. Okay, sorry, I promise I liked a lot of comics this week. They were not at the beginning of the alphabet. Okay, this is Avengers Assemble. And there's a lot of DC in here too, but Marvel just was at the beginning of the alphabet. And Indie. So this is Avengers Assemble, written by Steve Orlando, penciled by Jose Luis, inked by Oren Jr., and colors by Sonia Abeck with letters by Corey Petit. This was pretty great. It was a pretty great fight. The art looked really, really cool. I think the best art this whole series had. Basically, each issue of this 5-issue series had been a one-shot story, and this was the final one-shot story, but it kind of picked up some elements from the previous ones to kind of tie it all together into one and show this team of kind of pickup Avengers getting out of the small ball of just dealing with little capers and threats and dealing with the big ball of the Serpent Society trying to do something that would fundamentally alter the world. It was a really great fight. It was paced really well. I was proud of Steve Orlando. He's not really good at that stuff all the time. And again, the colors by Sonia Abeck, who's been around a long time but has not been doing much for Marvel lately, were really glorious. I think if anything, the fight just didn't seem like it had a really clear stopping point. There was like and now Hercules has done the thing, the fight is over, which is fine because I think it was well paced and everybody had their spotlight. But that was really my only complaint of an issue that was otherwise really delightful. And I love this Avengers team. They're not on the cover, so that's not going to help me. But it was like Shang-Chi, Wonder Man, Photon, Julie Power, Captain America, Lightning, and She-Hulk, and Wasp. What a fun squad of characters who are being underused right now. I think Avengers, more than X-Men at this point, really does need a second title that just has like a squad being Avengers. I didn't read Batman and Robin Year One. It's by Mark Waid, and it's a retcon continuity story. I'll read it at some point when it's all together. I don't need to suffer through individual issues of that. Speaking of suffering through individual issues, here's another Mark Waid series. It's Batman, Superman, World's Finest. That's a joke. I think that once I say that I don't like a certain creator a little bit, a near mint condition, people assume the Crisis Deep Lords that I just hate them because there are a lot that I hate. Mark Waid is fine, but I find this book to be so marginal. Everything about it is just a random retconny continuity. Like, here's a thing that maybe happened and maybe didn't. He's got some great artists on it. They're not Dan Mora, but so much of why you love Dan Mora is him being colored by Tamara Bonvillain, I'm telling you. And so this is by Mark Waid with Adrian Gutierrez on art and still Bonvillain on colors and Steve Wan's lettering. And so it really feels the same as the Dan Mora issues. And it's like a fun Aquaman thing. It plays with Superman's like undersea girlfriend that he used to have. It's set in the Dick Grayson as Robin era, but it's just so like, why? It's a decent story, but I just don't understand why this series exists. But I understand that it pleases a lot of people. So if you're just looking for DC stories that are ostensibly in continuity, but they're fun, they're big, they're bold, they're colorful, they use the heroes in a recognizable form, and maybe have a couple nods to continuity, and maybe will get referenced in some way, then it's fun for you. And I think that's the difference between this and other retcon series. Mark Waid is making sure that the things he seeds in this series actually get used in other series in the DC universe. Tons of them came to fruition in absolute power. So I really think that that's like the one thing for a person like me who's a total continuity cop, like, why am I reading this retcon? That they're not just going to be written as a retcon and then kind of just float away into the air. There's another series, I think, later on in this stream that I'm going to get to talk about that. Oh, there is. That's like the perfect retcon series. And I'll explain why that one works for me and this one doesn't. Let me get a couple of comments and then we're going to continue. So, so let me just change back to full me on the screen. Okay, let's see. Diamond dipping out. It's going to cause even higher prices somehow. I mean, Lunar's rise cause all of our Marvel omnis to go up because there's less discount, asks or states Larry's Library. Yeah, you know, it's hard for me to understand here from New Zealand because I mean, I'm buying through IST and DCBS, but I'm so divorced from Diamond. I don't even use Diamond to generate this stuff anymore because so many major retailers have left them. I think ultimately we might lose some discounts. Some of those deep discounts are the result of massive monopolies and monopolies kind of deigning to give us discounts. But if there's going to be a non-monopoly, maybe the players are going to be more competitive with each other and offer discounts. I don't know. But that is Bunkmaster B and everybody else asking deeper questions, not about the comics. You got to save them towards the end for AMA because I'm not necessarily going to be able to scroll all the way up to here. Hank asks, and I know this is an AMA, but I caught my fancy, so I'm going to read it. Will I be a dummy if I don't pick up the Vampirella Archives as their re-release is softcover starting this year? It's going to blow my budget, but I imagine it might be worth it for the art. Well, I've got all of them right here, and I love them. I'm only one in, but they're really beautiful. These are the hardcover ones, of course. I love the art, and Dynamite is actually, Hank, really good at keeping things in print. I just bought some Vampirella omnibuses from them that have been in print for like almost a decade. So I don't think you have to worry too much about grabbing them as soon as they come out. Dynamite, if you notice on DCBS or on In-Stock Trades, they re-solicit stock all the time. Dynamite, I guess because they're a small enough company that they like know that they need to keep making money off of these print runs, does not just print things short and then give up on it. They really keep vlogging it. So I would say you don't have to FOMO as hard with Dynamite. Dynamite trades, especially of archival material, very, very rarely FOMO. Okay, a lot of AMA type stuff. Y'all, I'm not going to see these until so much later. Newsy Pool Channel says, you pick who's the best character on the worst superhero team and the worst character on the best superhero team. I don't know. I will say this. I love Mr. Terrific. Right now, he's being used as sort of just like the ever so slightly secret-keeping science guy for the Justice League. That's a waste of Mr. Terrific. Justice League's fine, but he's leading a title character. Unfortunately, the sales are not there for him to lead a title, so it's not happening. But I really, really think that he should be leading a title. And then the worst character on the best superhero team, I guess by definition, I think the best superhero team right now is Avengers because that's in my top 10. I don't know if there's a worst character on Avengers. They're all really good. I will say it doesn't really feel like there's a purpose division right now. Like he's back. He's a synthesoid again. He's not with Wanda. He doesn't really feel like he has an arc. And he's one of the only Avengers that isn't appearing in another book or doesn't have his own continuity. So I don't think Vision's the worst character, but I do kind of feel like I keep forgetting he's in Avengers. And then he's on panel. I'm like, oh, jump scare. Vision jump scare. Okay. Oh, you know what? Maybe those were still from the AMA period. Okay. So I forgive my admonishment. Let's see if anybody had anything to say about those ones that I just went through. Warren Wilson says, I can't stand John Ridley comics. He really writes the characters in a horrible way. Yeah, you know, he's one of those ones that I always give a chance because every so often he hits for me. I really like the other history of the DC universe. I think when he does a deep dive, he's really, really good. But I can't say I've liked him on any ongoing superhero comics. Bonjour, Alex Infermier, who says, Bonjour, Crisis Peter, ravi d'enfant assister à une live. Wonderful. I do kind of understand that, but I'm not going to translate it for you live. Okay, let's see if anybody else commented on the books I was doing. Logan Wayne says, Anansi Boys is written by TV writer and Kevin Smith's Fat Man Beyond podcast co-host, Mike Bernardin. He announced on Instagram he'll no longer be writing, adapting it, and it won't be collected in trade. Well, so much for that then. And next Imaginaut is just asking the chat for some stuff. I'm trying to let you have your own space in the chat. I don't have to show every single thing to the whole world here on the screen. Ryan Wilson says, World's Finest is one of the hottest comics around, but it hasn't been interesting for a while. I do like that it's doing quicker hit issues, but I think it had some real fire behind it at the beginning. It lost me on that Amazo arc. It was just too long. Too long. And Captain Okama says, so happy I'm back streaming again. And he or they needed me. Well, I needed you guys because otherwise I would just be streaming to one person. And quite honestly, I would probably be doing this anyway, but I would still be streaming to just one person. It's more fun to stream and have a conversation. Okay, let's get back to the, what happened to that great new layout I made with the thing on the other side? There we go. Okay, let's get back to it, shall we? I'm going to continue to check in about every 5 books. So this book is a new #1 from Dark Horse called Behemoth. And I almost always will read a new, I got to take that banner off. I almost always will read a new #1 just to see if I like it, unless the concept seems like it's going to really piss me off or offend me or I don't like the creator. I just don't know about this one. So it's by Grant Sputoria and Ryan Engel with art and colors by Jay Martin, letters by Frank Sidovic. Here's the thing. It's kind of like about a Godzilla, kaiju kind of thing. It starts out with this whole scene where it's emerging from the sea. There's a little fishing boat and a bigger boat, but then there's a kaiju. And then we cut to New York, and like that whole opening scene seems to be all for nothing. It's just to tell us the kaiju's coming. And then there's like your standard mayhem, which I didn't even show on this page. The art's okay. And then they all get swallowed. So maybe the whole series is going to be in the belly of a kaiju. I don't know. But the thing is, it felt very pilot of a sitcom that never got picked up. There's this lady, she's got a food truck. She lives in a food truck, but a good thing because her best friend drives a tow truck. But she also works at the local Amazon fulfillment center. It just felt like very, let me just make up a bunch of circumstances for this character instead of letting us sit with the character and learn who she is. And she's got a photo of her dad and she's got to get it from the truck before she runs away from the behemoth. It just didn't have any juice for me. So I hope they're okay down there in its stomach, but I'm going to assume that they're digested by stomach acid and that I do not need to read any more issues of that comic. Next, we have Black Lightning. This is written by Brandon Thomas with art by Fico Osio, colors by Ulysses Ariola, who I love right now, and letters from Lucas Gattoni. So this is another one that I'm really struggling about, who is it for? It's called Black Lightning, but it's mostly following his daughters as they feel bad about having superpowers. I honestly don't even remember what the conflict was here. Somebody was attacking some building. It's like his daughter has a power, his other daughter doesn't have the power, but she gets her power back. No, bullshit. I'm stupid. Why? If it's called Black Lightning, focus on who these characters are and stop focusing on this stupid power go round. This is the only one of the all-in books that is so focused on the power swapsies that it's not actually giving us any moments of interest with the characters. And I love Black Lightning, and I actually really appreciate the art here, but this one is Floptina for me. I hate it. I promise there's comics I like later in the stream. I promise. I often read alphabetically, and this was a very rough start to the week for me. I almost gave up and said, maybe we don't need a stream. But then I persisted to Resurgence of Bloodshot by Fred Van Lente. I missed you, friend. Artist, Rodrigo Rocha and Leo Lujan. Colors by Brushu Studio and flats by Ludwig Olimba and letters by Ezekiel Verni. I love this. It's possibly our last moment with Bloodshot from the Valiant universe because they're going to do a Valiant relaunch in a couple of weeks. And this had not only Bloodshot, but Ray. Now, I think Ray is always a little bit inside baseball because he's Bloodshot technology, but he's from the future. But I read all those comics. So to me, it's not too inside baseball. And honestly, I think this comic really explained it really well. If you have a vague idea who Bloodshot is and you just want to see him have one knockdown, drag out, like, can my regenerating nanobites work better than your regenerating nanobites fight? This is really, really pleasing. Ultimately, it's not going anywhere because it's a one-shot and the universe is about the end. But I haven't read any of the other Valiant stuff because I just found out in last week's stream that it's still in continuity to the old Valiant universe. I didn't know, and I enjoyed it. So I would say yes for Ray fans, and it's really just nice. Where's Fred Van Lent been? Hopefully getting like really good TV money or something, because I really, really, really love his writing, and he used to be all over the place, and he is less so now. Okay, Kanto I don't read. I used to read it. It's cutesy. Frio really liked it back in the day on This Week in X, but it's just too cutesy for me, and I couldn't really get into it. Okay. Challengers of the Unknown, another one of these all-in books. This one is by Christopher Cantwell. There's a lot of artists on it and a lot of different colorists, but just one letter, Hassan Otsman Alio, so I will highlight him. Y'all, I am into this book. I'm into it. This, to me, kind of feels like what Hickman was doing with Gods at Marvel, but with Gods being these unseen players that were bigger than life. This is with like smaller players. We've met the Challengers of the Unknown. They're human. They shouldn't be so deep in League business, but something about Darkseid's absence has changed them, infected them, and the League and Mr. Terrific is kind of onto this. And so they're trying to get them to explore these urges that they're having to like follow these messages of death that they're being sent from the Earth and all around the universe one by one, because it's good to keep them apart. But what if we keep them apart and we put one Leaguer with them and we give them a snazzy purple outfit to match the Challengers? This is really fun. I'm totally into the mystery. The changing of artists between scenes really, really worked. I think Batman's repartee with June from Challengers was really great. I am like hooked. I like that there's a limited series with a really clear mystery. I don't feel like I have to know anything about the Challengers. Maybe it's totally getting them wrong and it's totally ruining everything you loved about Challengers of the Unknown. I would have no idea. I'm into it. And I think if you've read that DC All-In special and you're looking for like one off to the sidelines all-in book to read and really enjoy, so far 2 issues in, this would be my pick. Day of the Dead Girl. I got to read this one on Global Comics. Hooray! So this is from Magma Comics. It is script by AJ Mendez and Amy Garcia, art by Belen Colbras, colors by Sarah Stern, letters by Sean Lee. Folks, this team, Marvel needs to hire this art team now. They need them on a title tomorrow. Runaways, She-Hulk, they could even alternate. They could maybe with a little bit color tweaking alternate on Extraordinary X-Men. It's one of those indie books where I opened it and I was like, this is an indie book from a small publisher. The faces, the likenesses, the acting, the panel layouts, it all really works. I actually love this series. It was my number 12 in my top 10 power rankings. It's about this young lady who just became a big city medical examiner, but then she has to move home to her mother's house, and in her home her mother is a witch. But not only is she a witch, she's the witch, the main witch of the coven, but somebody's trying to murder the coven, and the medical examiner is going to be useful as a medical examiner, but maybe also is she a witch? The one thing I have against it, and the reason it's not a perfect comment, is it really compresses the storytelling. And I like compression over decompression, but we're into like 3 murders and 2 autopsies in one night already, as in 3 issues. So that's given me a little bit of whiplash, but the art is, it's kind of like Jamie McKelvey-esque. I think, not that indie comics shouldn't have good art teams, but some DC or Marvel needs to snap these people up. And I think that they're a little bit more Marvel's tone. I'm going to keep reading it. And this is one of those comics that's good enough that I am going to keep reading more Global Comic or Magma Comics on Global Comics, because it's so damn good. Like, yeah, great advertisement for your company. That's how Mad Cave hooked me back in the day, like 5 or 6 years ago. Every time I'd buy a Mad Cave book, the art was really good. And I feel like often when you buy small indies, you have this little footnote in your head, like, well, the art's going to suck, but I'm going to support them anyway. So to open an indie comic and have the art be really, really good, that's like a great moment of like, okay, I guess I'm going to really love this. Let's do it. Let's see a couple of comments while I drink some water. Pima says they also lost interest in DC World Finest. James Abel read Behemoth. Not just me. Had a blast with it. Popcorn fun. The art popped from the pages. It feels like a Godzilla book. I think kaiju is a little bit out of my normal trope zone. It's not one of my favorite regular tropes. So I think that's absolutely a reason that somebody who's a little bit more, I'm more into heaven and hell stuff. I'm more into things like that. If you're a Godzilla person, Behemoth maybe would hit for you. I just didn't also really like the pacing of that opening scene, but not a bad thing. Kenneth Crowley Jr. says he does wish we had an ongoing Supergirl title again at DC, but maybe when the movie comes out, we'll get it. Well, Supergirl just had a pretty cool backup by Mariko Tamaki in that weekly run of Action Comics. And I agree. Like, to me, that's why Action Comics should always be a fast-paced, serialized front story and a backstory with the Superman supporting characters. I don't understand why we're making it like an all Superman book. That's what Superman's for. Kenneth also says the Black Lightning comic reminds me too much of the CW TV series. Maybe they're leaning into that, though, because the CW TV series certainly has way, way more viewers and fans than the comic book of Black Lightning has ever had. So maybe it's like really, really aimed at the people from the TV show, and that is not why it's working for me. And Alex Informier says, watching the Black Lightning TV show on Netflix nowadays and really not convinced. Max Appleman, the timer is not just for ornamental reasons as you propose. I actually am paying attention to it. And when it starts blinking, I do know that I do have to start winding down. Nova Arg says, impressed that I have the time to read every issue that comes out from every big publisher. Well, you know, let's be honest. It does benefit me because I have all of these comic book guides. And if I read all of the issues, then it's easier for me to update all of the comic guides and I get into a rhythm. My vision I've always had, which we're almost there, is I read all the comics, I update all the guides, I make a video about all of the comics. We're there for 3 weeks running. So this is what I've always wanted to do. All of the things gets easier. Even the reading of the issues gets easier if I'm always up to date. Kenneth Crowley Jr. loving Challenges of the Unknown. Yeah, Christopher Cantwell, a little hit or miss for me. His indie books sometimes go a little off the rails. She Could Fly gets a little totally insane. But I really liked him on Iron Man, and I think he tells a good story when he knows what the beginning, middle, and end are going to be, and doesn't get too goofy. I think he got too goofy on that Thanos series, and a lot of people got angry about it. You got to reel it in a little bit. James Abel apparently read Day of the Dead Girl. James, you are deep in this comic polls. This issue moved very fast. I think it needed more time to breathe, but the series feels like a pilot for a TV series. I'd agree with all that. It does feel very piloty. I think it needs moments to breathe, but you know what? If you can only afford artists this good for 4 or 5 issues long, well, then you make it compressed. Tyler, who's apparently reading DC, it's like I don't even know you, Tyler, says the Challengers and the Question work hand in hand. They do, and we're going to be talking about the Question later. Chris Brogan says, nice, AJ's writing another comic. She wrote the second Glow series that never got made into a trade. Oh, well, cool. Nice that you know who this creator is, AJ Mendez. I think one of the things I really like about this comic, Day of the Dead Girl, is the voices are really good and distinct. Like, yeah, it's in a rush, and the rush is wearing me out a little bit. But even from the first dialogue, I really understood who this mother and daughter were and their playful relationship. They didn't need to like give me a big exposition dump. They didn't need to have a bunch of pages where they were just like sniping at each other. I just got it. And I think a lot of comics, that is one of the things I really have a problem with when the comic starts with just pages and pages of people like exposition dumping or just monologuing so we can get to know their voice without telling us who they are. I get so tired because I know that a good writer like AJ Mendez can do it all at once. Kevin Cork, Challenges in the Unknown, something about putting characters in alt color costumes really activates my pleasure centers. Me too, Kevin Cork. Giving me that G.I. Joe in Ninja Force action, kind of like repaint vibe, right? Like give me the alternate version of the figure. Also, James Abel points out Day of the Dead Girl is written by Amy Garcia, who starred in Dexter Lucifer TV series. Wow. So maybe it really is somebody's pitch that was a TV show that didn't get made as into a TV show. Newsypool says they like fast-moving comics. One of the issues I had getting back into comics a decade when comics were spending 6 issues to tell 1 issue's worth of story. Well, you know, I think speed and compression are not always the same thing. This comic is certainly not compressed, but even in being very compressed, I just think that the speed of it on the this could not happen in one night. There's not enough time for the serial killer to drive around and kill all these people. It breaks me out of suspension of disbelief. If this had even happened over 2 days, it wouldn't feel that fast. But I agree. I do like compressed comics that move faster. Am I a fan of Saga? Asked Foxhound. Yes. And I'm going to catch up with Saga all the way for the last issue of the season, which is out this week, I think. Maybe next week. This week's release day is the 22nd. It's out next week. So I have 2 weeks to read, I think, all 18 issues. They start at 55. They're ending at 72. Yeah. So I'm really excited for that. And all right. And Alex Infirmier says, kind of sad I don't read floppies anymore. Honestly, I don't miss the floppy experience, but I miss the discovery experience. So this lets me have the discovery experience without the floppy experience. Let's keep moving. This series, Luana Vecchio's Doll Parts, A Lovesick Tale. It's a sequel to an original Lovesick Tale that's really, really not safe for work, really, really disturbing, about a serial killer that's into a BDSM SM club, but also is a serial killer. I read the first issue of this origin of her. It starts with her as a girl. It is the most disturbing comic I ever read. And I don't mean in like, ooh, titillating, hard disturbing. Like, I do think some of it maybe shouldn't have been published by Image. And I am not a censorship person. I'm not going to call up Image and be like, I'm boycotting you. But there was some stuff in that first issue that I don't know should be a widely distributed comic. So I'm not going to keep reading it. Exceptional X-Men. This is by the team that's been on every issue of Eve Ewing on writing, Carmen Carnero, one of my favorite artists, Nolan Woodard, one of my favorite colorists, and Travis Lanham on letters. I'm having the problem with this issue 5 that I'm having with every issue of Exceptional X-Men. It's just too decompressed, what we were just talking about. This whole issue, and also, I do think Eve Ewing is writing Kitty well, but I don't get all this consternation about Kitty killing the Orchis soldiers from X-Men 25 in the Fall of the House of X being the whole driver of this series. Like, Kitty was in a fight for the life of herself and everyone she loves. And what this series is doing is not only having her regret that decision, but also having her regret the whole, basically all of Krakoa. Like, this starts out with her looking at an image of her in her Kate Pride pirate costume and being like, I don't even know what I was going through. Well, a lot of us deeply identified with what she was going through. And as a perspective character, really identified with the fact that she was growing up with us. And I get everybody's got to be returned to their factory settings. But even though I love what this is doing, I really am finding myself viscerally angry that we're backtracking Kitty's character, but also it's so decompressed. It's like 1/3 of an issue of New Mutants by Chris Claremont. And make no mistake, it is New Mutants. Everything about it, the vibe, the cast, the storytelling. There's a New Mutants book. Tom Brevoort even said that it could have been called New Mutants, but he thought it would sell more with an X in the title. It's still my favorite of the 3 flagships by far. It's still got the best art by far. It's still got the best colors, the best voices. It's the best of the 3 X-Men books. If it was double shipping, and if they got that team from Day of the Dead Girl onto the art so they could alternate with Carmen Carnero so we could have 2 arcs at a time, this would be stomping the other X books. But paced at the once a month pace, it's just dragging too slow. We're like still looking at Kitty in a gym with a bunch of yoga balls. Like, let's go somewhere. What is this book about? Okay. Feral, I didn't decide to keep reading this one. I read the first 2 issues. It's from Toby Fleeks, who I love, who is the creator of Stray Dogs. He's also the co-creator and artist of Local Man, which I'm obsessed with. It's kind of doing Secret of Nim meets The Walking Dead. Like, a bunch of domestic cats get taken by animal control, and they're taken away because there's like really, really bad rabies, or is it just rabies infecting all of the animal life? I don't really anthropomorphized animals, and they're like not on their hind legs. They're just being normal house cats that like have opinions and are talking to each other. That's just not in my wheelhouse. It's not one of my normal tropes. If you love that, and if you love the idea of anthropomorphized house cats out in the wilderness trying to understand what rabies even is, and then also, I left that Alex Infirmier comment up the whole time. Self-producing is hard. And if you like all of that and that rings for you, you love the aristocrats but horror, then you will love this. It's not in Marvel and DC, and it's not really in my wheelhouse, so I kept moving. Flavor Girls apparently is a second series that is part of this kind of like magical girl thing. I looked at the interior arcs. I was like, what if this is another Lumberjanes? The art's actually pretty good, and it's clearly riffing off of Sailor Moon, but I could not stand the lettering. And when you're an indie book, I hate to hold you to a higher standard than any tripe of Marvel and DC that I would read. But when you're an indie book, I need you to like bring it. And if there's anything that's not readable, especially for a property I'm not familiar with, it's going to scare me away. So I was going to catch up on this, but the letters just unfortunately turned me off. Here we are with my #1 comic so far of 2025. So this is not going to be a minute. This is FML by Kelly Sue DeConnick with art by David Lopez, colors, which are amazing, by Chris Peter, letters by Clayton Clowes. I followed the DeConnick Fraction family for a long time because Fraction was writing X-Men when I came back to X-Men. So I like follow them on social media. So I've watched them and their kids grow up. I've watched them get their TV gigs. Kelly Sue DeConnick, I think, wrote like a Cirque du Soleil script. And this comic is very autobiographical. It's not quite them, but it's them. The main mom is Kelly Sue DeConnick. The daughter is very recognizably her daughter. And the son, who is now turned into a giant fuzzy monster, but everybody's okay with it, is very recognizably their son. And Fraction even makes an appearance. But it's the storytelling with this that gets me. It's a comic, but it's punk rock, but it's also a little bit of a zine. For the son, he's so worried about his social standing and being part of this group of outcasts, but they have this awesome death metal band, but they get involved in a satanic ritual that maybe they shouldn't. So now he's a big fuzzy monster, but they're still going to play death metal. It just makes it even cooler. Meanwhile, the mom is a cartoonist who is way overdue on her next book. She's taken the advance, so she can't go back now. But really, she's only working on the book because the style of the sketchy part at the bottom is like supposedly her cartooning, because she wants to solve the mystery of the best friend that she had a band with when she was a kid, who got murdered by a serial killer and has never been caught. But now she's onto him because she's seen that person in her sphere of influence for the first time in over 20 years. I love it because even though there's like a mystery there, there's so much more than that. I love David Lopez's art. The colors by Chris Peter are amazing. The letters are so readable yet so varied. But I love that we're playing on multiple levels here because it is autobiographical about Kelly Sue DeConnick. It talks about this character going into shock and like feeling shock and why she's in shock and how to get out of that panic attack state. And you know that's from real life. The kids are clearly from real life. The husband, who's clearly the Fraction stand-in, is calling from a TV pitch meeting in LA to check on her. It's all from real life, but it's not purely autobiographical. It's fanciful, it's fictionalized, and the music stuff makes sense. One of my big pet peeves is when people have bands in comics and they're not doing things a band would really do, or if they lyrics in comics and lyrics don't track. This issue had a really awesome punk show, and all the music stuff made sense. It's clear that musicians are making this and music fans are making this with love. The lyrics track, there's a really cool discussion of the monster with his big hands and how he can't play his normal bass lines, so they're going to retune his bass, which I thought was a mistake, because I'm like, basses don't usually have chords. Why are we retuning the bass? But it was so that he could play more as bars instead of having to like walk back and forth from roots and fifths. So that made sense. Then they had a slide trombone. It was delightful. So I think part of this is because I love the reading stuff from Kelly Sue DeConnick. I loved Wonder Woman Historia, which if you want to hear my opinions on, I read for Omnidog's Vault last week for our monthly jamming on comics. I love David Lopez, but everything about this is something that I like, and it's got zine energy. All of the back matter is Kelly Sue DeConnick making zines, and like this one had a cool essay about her youth and her finding a writer that really mattered to her, but past ones have had like make your own dolls, they've had word searches, like it's got big zine energy, and I just find it so charming. It's going to be hard for any comic to unseat this for me because it is so exactly what I love about comics. I've heard a lot of people say that Minor Threats is really cool. I hadn't really been reading any indie while it was first coming out, so I didn't read it at all. It's from the mind of Patton Oswalt and Jordan Blum, but other people are, what is it? Is it like Black Hammer? I don't even know. So I saw that there's this From the World of Minor Threats, The Brood, and I know my whole thing is I'll just read anywhere and like start reading and see if I like it. But I was like, well, if it's really good and people like it, maybe I should go back and read it. So maybe I'm going to do a Minor Threats binge next month when I get the chance, but I'd super be interested in your comments on it. So, like, is it something I'm going to like, or is it going to piss me off? You know me at this point. G.I. Joe! Okay. Kid Crisis is downstairs watching the G.I. Joe movie right now. G.I. Joe from Skybound Entertainment and Image. This is issue number 3. Joshua Williamson writing, Tom Riley on art, Jordi Belair on colors, and Russ Wooten on letters. This had a big buildup, right? There was a Cobra Commander series, a Duke series, and there was a Scarlet series, and a Destro series. Finally, we're at G.I. Joe. And the first 2 issues just didn't feel really tangible to me. I'm a big G.I. Joe fan, but I also like G.I. Joe comics because they combine a sheen of sci-fi warfare with some really good kind of covert operative stuff, and then some good just out and out war. And I think that this issue is the first issue that got all the way there. Of course, Tom Riley's art has been great. Jordi Belair's colors are also great. But this had this great comment that for me encapsulated that this is moving in the right direction. They were using these laser guns. I think I didn't snip the page. And they're looking at this gun they've captured from Cobra, and they say, this gun is way too small to have this level of laser technology. Oh, must be because we got it from Energon, from those giant robots. I love that we're acknowledging that there's some sci-fi elements of G.I. Joe that are like bigger than what the toys were originally conceived to be, which were like real down and dirty army operatives. but we're layering that from the start. So we don't have to take like 5 years to get there, but also we've got some good like people in a tank fisticuff action. This is the first issue that has struck that perfect balance for me, and I love a good G.I. Joe story. I am such a Cobra Law fiend. I know I'm over time. It doesn't matter. And I love the triad of badness that's set up here. Cobra Law, who Cobra Commander is trying to get a divorce from, but are still snooping on him. Cobra Commander, who absolutely cannot be trusted and is a coward, but is also quite deadly, as we see on this page. And then Destro's Mars Industry, which is in bed with Cobra Commander so they can use his knowledge, but are not really comfortable with him. And I love the constant backstabbing circle between them. Also, Baroness is on the G.I. Joes in this book. Very, very cool. Finally, it's clicking for me. I hope this is not a fluke and we're going to keep moving in this direction. I'm going to do a couple more and then I'll stop for some comments. This is Green Lantern Fractured Spectrum. I'm about 6 issues behind on Green Lantern, but this was the next Green Lantern epic starts here, it says. So I started here with writing by Jeremy Adams, who is the main Green Lantern writer, art by V. Ken Marion, colors by Romulo Farajo Jr., and letters by Dave Sharp. This was good. It was fine. The whole point of the Lantern book up to now, the first year of the Lantern book, or year and a half, was that like lanterns aren't working, the core are fractured, Hal doesn't have his ring. This kind of establishes all of the status quo that's back, and it establishes that the color spectrum is back, but it establishes that something's broken about the color spectrum, and now we've got a different person representing this kind of gray / colorless / amorphous color that is going to be plaguing the core just as the core gets put back together. I think that I like that this is a one shot that kind of gets everything all kicked off and we're going to know what we're doing in the Green Lantern book and in the core book. I don't love V. Ken Marion's line weights. He's part of that imitator of Greg Capullo class along with Gleb Menkelov, and I just think their lines are way too fine, and sometimes it just makes the features of the face disappear. So not my favorite artist, and we all know I hate Hal Jordan, but I was interested in this. I don't think Jeremy Adams is the most exciting writer, but I think he's a man with a plan. And on Green Lantern, especially after years of Jeff Johns, and then also who's the person after Jeff Johns, he also wrote Exo Manowar, Robert Venditti. I think you do need somebody with a plan that's not just writing one-off Green Lantern stories. I don't think anybody wants to read that. They want to read like a Green Lantern epic, and I think this is doing the trick. And then I'll do one more and then take my break. Grimm Tales of Terror. So Zenescope sometimes does these horror anthology books where they just kind of tell one somewhat based on folklore story per issue. This one told the story of like a big marble angel in a graveyard who was maybe put on the grave of somebody who was an adulterer, and so she always haunts adulterers. It was fine. I think it was fine to do in one issue, but it's just one of the, I'm like, I don't know. It just felt a little insubstantial to me. Like, okay, so there's a bunch of college students and one of them's cheating on another one and it wakes up this thing. None of it was really viscerally scary. None of it got really deep into the mythology. And so it kind of just felt like a random spec script for Buffy the Vampire Slayer that somebody just kind of wrote to be like, oh, Buffy could deal with this Marble Angel 1 week. And it didn't really feel like it was like vital. And it kind of made me think like, do I need to keep pulling this series? Because sometimes in these horror anthology one-shots, they've done really interesting stuff and and it has been really creepy and it has delved really into folklore. This one just felt kind of lightweight for me, but decent art. And if you're into that kind of thing, I think you would like it just fine. But I can't say that I strongly recommend it. Okay, let's see what the chat has been up to. Exceptional X-Men number 5. Jane Zabel says, feels like a callback to Uncanny X-Men 168. It was, because we had a very Professor Xavier is a jerk, only Kitty's the jerk this time. This series keeps feeling a series that aired on the WB UPN. Yeah, it's very... this is for the youths, but I think Eve Ewing is actually one of the few writers at Marvel who's good at writing youths. She was great on Champions as well. So I think that works, but it's really teetering on the edge on who is this for me right now. But it's for the youths, right? But I just think if it was shipping faster, it would get more done faster. Kenneth Crowley says, Exceptional X-Men has been a 50-50 so far. Loving Gail Simone's X-Men book much better. Well, that's a sentence you'll never hear out of my mouth, Kenneth Crowley. But I'm glad you like it. Newsy Pool Channel says, Exceptional X-Men, you can't put I quit on the cover of your issue without setting yourself up for unintended consequence, like people dropping the book. I agree. James Abel read Feral number 9. This was a bloody issue and he enjoyed it. If you like cats and being bloody and having Walking Dead zombie cats, then it's for you. Zero Zakku number 1 says, it feels like Tom Brevoort and company and editorial really don't understand Krakoa or why people loved it. Kitty had no choice but to fight against those who killed her own people. That nails my problem with a lot of the current X-Men comics. It's not that I need them to be slavishly devoted to Krakoa, hopelessly devoted even. I just need them to understand why mutants and readers thought Krakoa was important. And I think you can do that and also acknowledge why some mutants and some readers were creeped out by it. But I think what it's doing is totally willfully misunderstanding Krakoa, and that's making even the good books, of which there are not many, really, really not hit the way they should be hitting. NYX and Storm feel like the only two books that like really, really have understood Krakoa for me. But NYX for me is struggling with narrative. We're going to get to Storm. Next, Imaginet says more like execrable, more like execrable X-Men. I think it's the best of the three flagships. I would use Gail Simone's Uncanny X-Men to help me with some excrement, possibly after a trip to the elimination room. But that's my personal opinion. Michael Nedal says, Alex, I feel you, but just know that, talking about missing floppies, right? That you still get to enjoy the stories as a collected edition or digital just as much as floppy. You know who's expose, which by the way, if you haven't been to Tyler's channel, click on him in the chat, go to his YouTube channel. He's covering X-Men books in depth, one by one. He says, and I would trust his opinion, I think Ewing is taking a thread from Duggan's run that wasn't explored, i.e. Kate's violence, which did not only appear at the end, but was present from the beginning of Marauders and working it into exceptional. That's very perceptive. I do think that reframes my interest a little bit. I think there's something interesting there about, could she have been the yo-ho-ho, hard-drinking bisexual pirate, and not been as violent? What did it mean for her to mature and see maturity as going hand in hand with violence? And then also, on a meta level, how does that relate to us saying mature comic books will also be more violent? Maybe, Tyler, you just helped me like Exceptional X-Men a lot better, which is maybe why we should all be watching Tyler's channel. Michael Nedal says, oh my gosh, Farrell was so good. Constant dread in that boom and never know what will happen next. I'm going to keep talking while I open the window. It's getting kind of hot in here. Farrell seems really, really cool. And Tony Fleeks is such a smart writer and artist and scripter that I wish it was something I was into because it seems really cool. But it's like, I'm not going to read it every week and be like, cats, more cats again. So I didn't want to just be an asshole, but everybody really seems to be excited about it. And Penny Ma says that he loved Stray Dogs. There you go. James Abel on FML3 says, I'm enjoying the series, but I feel like it's trying to do too much from supernatural elements, murder mystery, real life events, etc. But also can't stop reading it. I want more of it. Yeah, I do feel like I thought it was going to be supernatural and then I thought it was going to be murder mystery. It's really ping-ponging a lot around, but I think you can get away with that autobio. In a way, it reminds me of Zoe Thorogood's It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth, which also, it was about her real life, very much so. It was specifically autobiographical, but it had flights of fancy. It kind of took off into fanciful settings. Sometimes she would be talking to different versions of herself or falling into her creations. And I like that kind of autobio. And so FML works in that way for me. Good afternoon to William Lee, a regular viewer who I really, really appreciate. And Jean-Remy Argueta. Hello. Managed to catch the stream while on break from work. Read the first issue of MML. I'm really good. Waiting for trade for now. Totally, totally fair. All right, let me see. Hey, Harvey Picar's Ghost, welcome to the stream, my friend. Says, G.I. Joe, one of the hottest indie comics on the stands. I can't tell if you're serious or not. The thing is, with that smiling face in your profile picture, Harvey Picar's Ghost, and with the tone you take, I never know if it's sarcasm or the real thing. So you'll have to come back and tell us if it is one of the hottest indie comics or if you're making a joke about how could G.I. Joe really be an indie comic. Okay. And Moonin sadly went from reading 40 comics a week, whereas where I am, gosh, we're only on G, to 5 to 10 due to pain reasons that got worse last July or June. And I'm way back and behind in my comics. That's what happened to me. That's exactly what happened to me in last June. The exact same thing. And now I'm having eye problems, which is slowing me down too. So I feel you, but I'm back because I want to be talking to all of you. Okay, we're going to keep going. Next, Imaginaut asked what my tablet setup is for reading digital. It's not. I'm in the same boat as you where I think maybe I do want a tablet. The thing is, especially when I'm doing guides and prepping blog posts and doing the show, I can't be reading on a different device than my laptop because I have to be able to interact with all the images and like screenshot or save the image. And it's really hard on Comixology. You can't just go to Inspector and just save the image from there the way you can in Global Comics. So I have such a huge suite of support tools to like let me do all the things I need to do to keep my web empire running that I don't think it would actually be more efficient on the tablet. I think I have to read on the tablet and then I would have to like do all that stuff on my computer anyway. So I just read on my computer. Long story short. Okay. Y'all, we're already an hour in and there's so many comics left to go. Gunslinger Spawn. Number 39. You know what I think about this issue? I think Todd McFarlane should be barred from writing comic books as part of the Geneva Convention. He has got this amazing Spawn universe. The characters are cool. The mythology is cool. He gets endless good artists and good colors. Why is he subjecting us to his writing? He's so bad. Or alternately, Todd, hi, let's talk. I could fix your writing so easily. There are so many caption boxes in this that just do not make grammatical sense. And even if they did, they'd be clunky as fuck. And I, as an editor with over 25 years experience, could very easy and for a low cost. See, I said very easy. That should have been easily, very easily. But you don't know that. And I can say that based on the quality of your scripts on the fast 5 years of Spawn. So this had art from Carlo Barberi and colors from Ivan Nunes and letters by Tom Orzechowski, a classic. And all of those things were great, but the script is a war crime. Finders Keepers, this is the last of the Horizon experiment, which was an experiment at Image Comics where we took some creators as cultivated by Pornsak Pinochet, who used to be an editor at, I didn't say that, Pico Show? I don't know. Used to be an editor at Vertigo, so perfect to put this kind of experiment together. And they said, pitch things that are not the normal pitch that we would get culturally. So this by Vida Ayala, not somebody I historically like at all, but artist Skylar Partridge, colors by Jason Morty, and letters by Becca Carey, who's one of my favorite letterers, is about what if we did Indiana Jones, but in reverse? What if there was somebody who worked for museums, but she was trying to take things from the museums and repatriate them back to their original cultures and original homes. Great story, great art, great letters, read really well, kept me engaged. Insofar as it's a pilot for more of this, I'm in. But Indiana Jones, the whole point is that there's an exciting, silly caper in the middle. Same for Tomb Raider. And even with this reverse Indiana Jones of putting the artifacts back, we needed more caper. Basically, we go from stealing the artifact to putting the artifact back where it should have been. And there's no middle fun part. So I would be willing to read more of this if it extended into an ongoing series. But Vida always has pacing issues for me. So if they are not going to have a middle fun part real quick, if this gets extended, then I would not hang around. But conceptually, really, really cool. And I loved all the little bits of real information about folklore, about archaeology that was scattered throughout. Next, Hal from Ahoy Comics. I checked out a couple preview pages from this. It wasn't really going to be my thing, unfortunately. Really, really nice art. But it's just another one of these Ahoy humor books, and they just don't hit for me that well. I Hate Fairyland from Image, issue 19. It's part 4 or 5 of an arc called Happy Endgame. Not a really big fan of like wacky hijinks in Fairyland. Scotty Young's whole aesthetic, not necessarily my thing. So this is not a book that I am reading. Now we are to Immortal Thor, which I teased earlier that I would have some words about. So Immortal Thor, this was a jam issue with a different artist on every page. And some of these artists were truly phenomenal. I knew the Dan Jurgens art immediately when I saw it. Dan Jurgens' Sif is unmistakable. Same for Valerio Schitti's Sif. Of course, he was drawing Sif on Journey in Mystery with Catherine Immonen at the beginning of Marvel Now. I loved this issue. You know why? Because it broadened the world of Thor, but every page kind of had to tell one distinct piece of a story, so it didn't get out of Al Ewing's control. It felt very explicable. We had this alternate version of a son of Thor trying to find his place in Asgard. At the same time, we have the Enchantress wondering why she sacrificed her own son, and Odin wondering what he's even doing in Valhalla. Even though there was a lot of characters and a lot of scope and a lot of different artists, the story hung together for me because it was clear what the characters were and what their motivations were, instead of trying to layer stories about ancient Asgard, about the time before Asgard. I think Ewing could probably simplify a little bit and get us to clearer motivations. It also had a great scene with Beta Ray Bill, but the Thor stuff just feels like it's so much a story about stories exponentially that I'm starting to lose track of if I should care about Thor anymore. And that's why I keep saying that I really feel like Ewing needs a vacation. The Incredible Hulk by Philip Kennedy Johnson, Danny Earls on art, Matt Wilson on colors, and Corey Petit on letters is one of the worst comics I've read in my entire life. It was horrible. It was totally, totally bad. For some reason, Werewolf by Night is fighting with Hulk's little girl friend, who also is a monster now, because why not? Hulk falls into the pit of hell in the middle of the woods. Why? Who knows? The thing is, Danny Earls is actually really good at place and setting, and then setting characters within that place and setting. But here he's just being tasked to do nonstop monster smash 'em up action. Nick Klein, who's the other artist on this title, is better at that part of Hulk. Danny Earls is better at the more somber, slower parts. This was just a hot mess. I could not tell what was happening. I didn't even really like the letters. Everything about it just was bad. This was a truly 0.5 out of 5 comic for me. Totally despised it. Speaking of things I totally despise, Tom King. Tom King writing women. Tom King writing any comic. So I'm not reading Jenny Sparks, even though it's a Wildstorm property. It is Black Label, so it is not in continuity, and I do not need to watch Tom King shit and piss all over one of my favorite properties. Jupiter's Legacy is by Mark Miller. I've not kept up with it. It's not that I hate Mark Miller. I'm just not up to date, so I'm certainly not going to jump in on the finale, which brings us to Laura Kinney, Wolverine, issue number 2. This is by writer Erica Schultz, artist Giada Belviso, color artist Rachel Rosenberg, and letterer Corey Petit. This was okay. I think Erica Schultz does get Laura's voice, which is a relief, because if you don't have the voice right, it's just somebody with claws. I really like the angular way Giada Belviso is drawing her in her costume, which is a very angular costume with this big, deep V on it with the big shoulder pads, but then draws a really cool, casual out-of-costume Laura, which really looks like her. Like, it looks like the out-of-costume Laura from now almost 20 years ago. I'm a little annoyed that this is using Elektra as Daredevil so much, and she's going to be the feature next issue too. And Erica Schultz is also writing the Elektra book, which is Red Band. This kind of feels like, oh, hey, let's put Elektra in a book that's not Red Band so people can get Elektra digitally while we're also doing this Red Band. Why not just do a Wolverine and Elektra, call it Wolverine and Daredevil as a team-up book, and have it really be Laura Kinney and Elektra? That would be really cool. I just don't really like when issue number 2 of a series, it's not even like it's an event tie-in and it had to tie into the event. It has Elektra and the next issue is 2, but it's just because Erica Schultz is writing both of those titles. So it actually was pretty good. I liked it. I like that it's a brief, contained story. But it's something that makes sense for her story, and it's something that continues from where we left Laura in issue number 1, even though you could just pick this up and read it with no confusion after issue number 1. I'm just really skeptical that we're hanging the first 2 and 3 issues of this so heavily on a guest star. Marvel Rivals issue number 5 is a Marvel Infinity comic that's available every week if you have Marvel Unlimited. It's written by Paul Aller with art from Luca Claretti, colors from Dee Cunniffe, and letters by Joe Sabino. This was exactly what I wanted. It was exactly what I want from this comic. It's silly. It's toyetic. They do combo moves. They joke. There's a loose frame of continuity around it to explain why you might be fighting in the game if you really need your fighting games with a story. But also, it's got like some jokes about like, does this story even matter? Haha, probably not. I think it's charming. It's obviously out of Marvel 616 continuity. But if you're enjoying Marvel Rivals or you just like a silly beat-em-up book, it is a book you might enjoy. Now we're talking about Miles Morales Spider-Man, issue number 29, written by Cody Ziegler with art from Danielle Di Niccolo, colors from Brian Valenza, and letters from Corey Petit. So I hate Danielle Di Niccolo's art on this book. It's got this cutesy webtoon quality to it, which is so different from the angular way Miles had been drawn up to this point and we had established as a look for the series. And not only is it so cutesy, but also I find that sometimes in the action, it's just like, what is happening here? Miles punches Panther, and then where is this middle panel? Is it Panther blocking the punch? We're too zoomed in and the panels are trying to be too clever and we can't tell what's happening. So then we don't understand how Panther flips Miles over, or where is the ground even as Miles tries to sweep the leg. Did the leg get swept or did Panther dive over it? I don't know. And then where is he jumping this panel? That's the story of the whole comic book. I understand there's a youthful character that the youths know from seeing the Spider-Verse movie. So I get it if Marvel feels the need to pivot this to a more webtoony sort of looking art to capture that from the more angular, stylish art that it had before, which was closer to what Moon Knight looks like. But I'm sorry, this artist is just not ready for primetime. I felt that way about him on DC. I feel that way about him here. Maybe primetime in a book without as much action, maybe primetime in a book that really could just be paneled in a more square way. But it's hard for me to take this book seriously if they're not going to put a serious artist on it who can draw the script that Cody Ziegler is turning in. Eventually, I had to just stop looking at the art and go back through and read just the word balloons. And the script continues to be great. Cody Ziegler is a good Marvel writer for Miles, and I'm not disputing you might like this artist, but for me, it's not the right kind of artist for an ongoing Marvel book in continuity that has 26 issues before this that are already in a style that is recognizable and quite attractive. Next, we come to Milestone Universe, The Shadow Cabinet, 3 of 4, written by Joseph Illidge, who's of course the grandfather or the father or the progenitor, the sire of the Milestone Universe, with art from the whole team, Darryl Banks, Atagun Ilhan, and Dennis Conwin, and inks from Pentas Rollins, colors from Christopher Sotomayor, and letters from Antiworld Design. I love this. I do not know the Milestone Universe at all. I've never read the Milestone Universe. I have all of the compendiums literally right here, but I'm waiting for them to be done so I can sit down and read it all at once. And then there's been this like revitalization of the Milestone Universe, which I haven't read at all, which has just been happening in the last couple of years. This is a comic that assumes that you know all of that, but it assumes it in the best possible way, and that like it's just going to keep moving forward. It's going to recap who a character is on the panel, but it's going to be exciting and big. I think it's a little too big for its own britches. I think trying to do a whole Milestone universe and address all of the characters in it, Icon, Hardware, Static Shock, everybody, all in one 4-issue miniseries is a lot, but the art is so gorgeous, and it makes me feel like this is a big world that's lived in, and it made me want to immediately go back and read more Milestone. So I've only read the 3 issues of this. I'm probably going to continue to backtrack and read some of the other miniseries that have happened since 21, and then when the final compendium comes out, I'm going to read all Milestone. This is the perfect way to respect an existing continuity of comics that you just can't have sustain a whole line. This is the way to do it. There are ways to do this. There are ways that we could extend things like Wildstorm, that we could extend things, universes like Valiant, without just restarting them, but who knows if it's selling. And I did see the editors and the writers say, if this sold, we could have more. So if you like Milestone, or you just want to check out a cool Milestone book, grab issue number 1 and see what the case may be. I'm going to go through a couple more, then I'll break for some comments. This is Jeff Lemire's Minor Arcana, issue number 5 from Boom Studios. I do not generally like Jeff Lemire, so I am not reading it. Monster High from IDW, new Scaremester. Neither I nor Kid Crisis is into Monster High, although maybe it's entirely charming, but I generally don't jump into books that are about IP that I don't know anything about. Next is The Moon is Following Us by Daniel Warren Johnson, Riley Rossmo, and Mike Spicer, with letters from Sean Lee. This book is something really, really special, but it's also very Daniel Warren Johnson, which most of you love, so I don't think that's actually going to be a conflict. The really interesting thing is that part of it takes place in a dream landscape, and part of it is in the real world. Riley Rossmo draws the dream landscape, which is perfect for his weird melted candle wax figures. Daniel Warren Johnson draws the real world, all colored by Mike Spicer, who I love and just brings such bold, bold colors to everything. This panel happens to be from the dream world. I loved the first 2 issues because they took it slow when it came to explaining the rules of this. I love rules for a dream world. I love that kind of Sandman universe type of feeling. And then the past 3 issues have been all action. It's very the thing that Daniel Warren Johnson likes to do, which is sacrificing a bunch of characters. Spoiler, I won't tell you who, but a bunch of people get sacrificed. And it has that classic Daniel Warren Johnson midway through an 8 to 12 issue series where there's a hard pivot with a big surprise at the end of this. Because I've read so much Daniel Warren Johnson, to me that felt a little bit expected. But I liked the slower, more obsessed with the rules of the dream world stuff of the first 2 issues, but it is still fantastic. Highly recommended. Great read. So inventive. Totally delightful. And it's a little more fun than a lot of the other indie works from Warren Johnson. It's still bloody and extreme, but because it's in a dream world, that bloody extremeness can be a little bit more fun. All right, let me go back for some comments and then keep moving on. Let me see. Where did we leave off? Nick N just arriving. If I've said hello to you once, you're getting another one from me because that is where I'm picking up. Kenneth Crowley Jr. says Green Lantern Corps number 1 was great. Loved it. When did that come out? Did I miss it already? I thought it was going to come out after this one shot, but I have to catch up on Green Lantern. I'm not caught up on DC on Green Lantern, Flash, Wonder Woman, Detective Comics, and Justice League. I think that's all of the big DC books that it's just because a new one hasn't come out yet, so I haven't had that week of catch up, and I just decided since this Green Lantern was meant to get people started, I was just going to come into it cold. Moonin says most stories in those horror comics have been just barely holding my interest as well. I agree, and I've seen them do it better before, which is why I will still show up for them, because I do like a nice one-shot monster of the week, folklore, mythology, horror story, but I just don't think that one was quite up to snuff. Jean-Remy Arguletta back to work, and we'll catch the rest of the stream later. So when you see this, hey, still thinking about you. Moonin said, sadly went for, oh, we did that. Sadly reading 4 comics, and we did my tablet setup. Okay. Does G.I. Joe fall under the banner of indie? It's on the biggest properties. It's one of the biggest properties in pop culture. Novarg. Look, this is a constant argument across all comic blogs and channels and social media. Does Image still count as indie? It's really the big 3 now. Image is one of the biggest 3. And there can be true creator-owned at Image or creator participating in Image. But Image also manages some IP stuff now, specifically at Skybound, because Skybound has grown so big that it's like almost bigger than the rest of Image itself off the back of Walking Dead and now Invincible. So that's why Skybound can go after these big properties like G.I. Joe and then bring them, and Transformers, and bring them home the way they are. You're not seeing Top Cow do that. You're not seeing Todd McFarlane's productions do that, because Skybound has the infrastructure to do that, has editorial, which Todd McFarlane, I'm available. So is it indie? No. I probably should just say big 3. It's why I've started giving Image its own post on Crushing Krisis. And in the guides to Crushing Krisis, it's under indie and licensed. But I think at this point, Image is big 3. Now, the real question becomes, is it an indie book if it's a true indie publisher like Mad Cave, right? Very, very indie. But they have the license to Flash Gordon. So is that indie? Flash Gordon has been around forever. Millions of people know what it is. Is it an indie book just because it's from Mad Cave? That's a more philosophical question than I am prepared to address right now. Yeah, these Spawn titles. Nick N says Gunslinger Spawn's on 39. Crazy. They started in the end of 2021, the beginning of 2022. And I think 3 of them were like ongoing the whole time, and other ones have kind of weaved in and out. So the Scorched is ongoing. We'll get to that. Gunslinger is ongoing, and King Spawn is ongoing. Then there's been a lot of miniseries, but they started some other ongoings, including Rat City. It's all covered in my Spawn guide, which I believe is available to the public if you go to Crushing Krisis and look for Spawn. And it's got all of the series in it, and they're doing an amazing job of reprinting old Spawn stuff this year. So I'm like having a Spawn resurgence, even though it is sometimes terrible. Michael Nadeau heard a lot of praise for this run. Haven't read it myself. Ooh, I never know what you're talking about if you don't say what the thing is, because things are moving fast here in Crushing Krisis land. Oh, the current Hulk run. Well, here's the thing. See, he already knew I wouldn't be able to realize. If you like Hulk as a horror comic, it's a really cool Hulk as horror comic. I just think Philip K. Johnson, I don't know if I like his overall plot. I've liked a lot of the individual horrific stuff, and I've liked a lot of individual issues, and it's an art book. But I think if you try to do this monster mash thing at such a high speed that your artist can't even show off, then you lose the competitive advantage you have of being like one of the best art books at Marvel. And if the story's not going to make sense, then it's like, well, what is left? The art's not good because there's no time to linger on it. The story doesn't make sense. It's not even a good monster fight. So like, there's no there. I think a lot of times, you know, the thing I'm asking myself as a reader is like, is this comic delivering the thing that it's promising? Is it delivering a thing that differentiates it? And when it just gets into that kind of like messy punch, dive, fall on the ground, shout, whatever, like it stops being a distinct and differentiated comic book. James Abel on Laura Kinney, Wolverine #2. What an explosion issue. I'm enjoying this team up with Wolverine and Daredevil. Yeah, you know, if I would remove that part of me who's trying to editorialize about like, should we have a team up this early? It's a good comic book. Like, I have no dispute about its quality. Ryan Wilson says Immortal Thor is all over the place. So many different plots, and they just keep adding more plots. So confused because they talk so much in riddles, too many moving parts for one book. And that, for me, Ryan, is why that issue worked, because it pretty much, to me, it just explained the thing I needed on the page. And then it gave me a moment of character to linger because each page was its own story. And that worked. I think Ewing needs to simplify. He needs to Marie Kondo his plots. You know who is still trying to pin down Laura Kinney #2? Is it good? Is it not that good? Undecided. He's got 5 reviews recorded and needs to edit and post them. Y'all need to go to his channel. Don't oh, you can't put it in the chat because you're not an admin, and I can't put it in the chat because I am. All right, let me see if I can go there. You know who? Nope, that's not it. Tyler, I need to get to your, I need to find a way to get to your channel in the middle of this so I can put it in the chat. So people, you know what? I'm going to put it in the community post that I do after this. I'm going to link to Tyler's channel so that everybody can find it, because you need to be you're not going to get the depth of X-Men you want from me. And Tyler dissects it all so well. And of course I love Tyler on top of that. But I'm just not going to get there fast enough on YouTube in the middle of doing the stream. Okay, so we're not going to try, but we're going to figure it out. Okay. Cruel Angel's been loving Minor Arcana. Sad the next issue won't be out until April. Well, for Jeff Lemire fans, maybe it's really, really hitting. Best writer for an Emma Frost solo run, asks Electric X Alpha. Somebody who's got that really haughty tone for her that also shows vulnerability. I was actually just thinking about this last night. I don't know why. I think Eve Ewing is doing a good job, honestly. I think Hickman really got Emma in a way that surprised me. He wrote so many good Emma moments, but I don't know who'd run a whole Emma solo run because I don't know what that would be about. It's kind of hard to... So James reminds us it's just UX pose. All right, let me see if I can go there real quick on YouTube and then paste it in because I should have that power. So, yes, okay, I do. And I'm going to put it in the chat and I will be linking to it in my community post. There you go. Please go subscribe to Tyler, y'all. It's Tyler. You know you already love him from watching him on my channel if you used to watch. And he's only got 124 subscribers. There's currently more than 7 of you watching the stream right now. Go and subscribe to him. I know I'm supposed to say like and subscribe to me, but like you're here, so you probably liked and subscribed me already. Go like and subscribe Tyler. But while we're on that topic, I really am not doing a lot of videos. It's really just going to be this one for a few weeks on out and then one community post a week. So you really could safely hit that subscribe notification bell and you're not going to get hammered with too much stuff from me. I promise. I will warn you if it's going to get crazy. Right now, this is as much as I can keep up with. Okay. Back to the books. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're in the back half of the alphabet. We made it. This is now my, what was it, number 4 comic of the year? New Gods. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Sometimes Ram V can let a comic get away from him a little bit. It starts so big. There's so much promise of poetry and symphony. And then sometimes just over time, I feel like there's not enough time to get into all the nooks and crannies of that. That's kind of what I think happened in Detective Comics. However, this I really am having faith in. Why? Because we have the heart of Mr. Miracle and Big Barda to hang in the middle of it. And I think that that really gives us a focal point, and it's something that's like cheerful and loving to kind of give us some focus in the middle. I love this mechanism where we're having some like amazing indie artist draw basically a short story in the first 4 pages of every issue that will color what we think about the rest of the story. Here it was Jesse Lonergan, but then Evan Cagle's art on this. I can't even talk about it. It's so remarkable. It's so fresh. It feels so much of an evolution from anything I'm seeing anybody doing right now. The colors from Francesco Segala, who I don't even really know, the colors are off down to the moon. Amazing. And I haven't really talked about the plot yet. So the idea is that the New Gods, are they gods? Or have they always just been closer to the source and closer to Darkseid, right? It's kind of just this, they're Kirby creations. So it's the same kind of story as the Eternals or the Inhumans or whoever. And so they detect there's going to be a new god on Earth. Does that mean that it's a new god or that it's descended from Darkseid? Or does it just mean that that little baby, not this baby, this is Big Barda and Mr. Miracle's baby, but this new child born a god is just born a god because for some reason they touch the source, which is such an interesting philosophical question. But also the idea of a god with that kind of power on Earth just when the new gods on Apocalypse have been destabilized by the power vacuum left by by Darkseid effing off to the absolute universe, that's too threatening. So something needs to be done about this child. I love it. I don't think you need to know anything about the New Gods because I know very little. I don't think you have to read the DC All-In Special. I don't even think you need to have read Tom King's Mr. Miracle. It's just good comics making. This is Nice House by the Sea by James Tynion and Co. I am so obsessed with this comic book. James Tynion, Alvaro Martinez Bueno on the art, Jordi Belair's the colors and world design on the letters. I had been behind on Nice House on the Lake, and I didn't really love it at the end of the first arc, so I was like, I don't know if I'm going to continue. And then a couple weeks ago, it's on DC Ultra. I thought, why not? The second arc pinned me to the wall like a butterfly, dried me out and stared at me. I was so taken aback. I was so spread open by it. I was so like totally shocked and enraged and engaged by it that it very quickly became my favorite Tynion book ever. This is a direct sequel. It makes things even bigger. It has a little Hickman quality to it. It's got so many more characters, but it's so much more focused, and it's you know, what if it was the end of the world? And what if you survived? And what if you thought you understood everything it meant to survive the end of the world? And then what if you became okay with living in the end of the world. And then what if then all the information you had about the world ending changed, and your whole world starts ending again because of it? The twist that Tynion pulled last issue and this issue with the characters that we know, but adding like an extra layer of understanding to let us reframe everything we saw in the first issue, totally blew my mind. I'm obsessed with this. It is one of my top 10 favorite comic books. This is absolutely top of poll, first off the rank every time a new issue comes out. I think if you started reading the first series and you're like, might not be for me, I would encourage you to get all the way through issue 12. Also, towards the end in 11 or 12, they started putting these great pages in that had all the characters just drawn as like character models with their name and their role, because they each do a thing: writer, artist, politician. Once I had that page in my hand, it became so much easier to understand the series. So I would like scroll forward until you get to the end of one of the issues on DC Ultra that has that page, and like screenshot that and keep it on the corner of your computer. And I think that will help you stay more engaged. Totally. Night of the Slashers from Magma Comics. I didn't read, but maybe I should, because that other Magma Comics book was great. This is written by Kevin Scott. Knights. Y'all, I have to talk to you about this. Are any of you reading this? If you're reading this, please get in the comments about this. I read the first issue. It's the exact thing that I love. I just couldn't get there. It's about this kid in an alternate version of Earth where Florida is still part of Spain in 1999, and he moves to Florida to live with his like uncle or like older cousin or something. But supernatural things are real, so that he's living with his cousin and a vampire and a ghost. It's so up my alley. The art is gorgeous, but there's something about the dialogue that I couldn't just get. Like, it was a lot of talking, and we heard how I say sometimes when people over talk to let us know who their characters are without giving us expository information, sometimes I get like a little blank behind the eyes, and it did that. And it was so good, and I could tell I was reading something good. And it had so much mystery. And then it like does this thing where it works across multiple times, like Powers of X. So then we like fast forward 10 or 15 years and all this bad stuff has happened. It's clearly a book I would like, but I just could not get my brain dug into issue number 1. So maybe it's great. This issue number 12 is the end of the second arc, and I was tempted to just read it and jump right in, but I was like, oh, maybe I should try to reread number 1 again. I don't know. I feel bad because it seems like a book I really like, and I don't know who these creators are. I don't think they're super famous, so I want to support their book, and it's so cool, but I don't know. I see Moonin saying that they dropped Knights a while back. Now we come to Nightwing. Issue 122, Welcome to the Cirque du Sin. This is by Dan Waters with art from Dexter Soy and colors by Veronica Candini with letters from Wes Abbott. This has the best art I have ever seen from Dexter Soy. I thought Dexter Soy was one thing, this thing that we always see Dexter Soy doing, these heavy ink lines that look like a sort of a evolved version of Jay Lee. But inside, he works with a much lighter line and much less of that ink. And then as a result, the colors just don't go in as saturated. It was beautiful. It took my breath away. I love seeing so many sketch lines on his art, which is not usually his way of doing things. But this Nightwing run, it just feels so like by the script that we always use. Of course, there's another flashback introducing, of course, another murderous circus that Robin knows from his youth. Of course, like, can we tell a good Bat family story without always needing to retcon something into the history? It makes me think you're a bunch of clumsy, stupid losers. Can't we just write a story about the present day? It just feels like such cheating when you have 60 years of DC Comics and it's all in hyper time. In fact, it goes back to the 1940s now, because technically even Golden Age could be part of hyper time if you need it. But you need to spend all these issues and all these flashbacks to insert a villain who's not even that interesting. I love Nightwing. I like Dexter Soy, and this is the most I've ever liked Dexter Soy. And I usually really like Dan Waters, but you got to try harder, Marvel Girl, because this is not doing it for me. Okay. The Oddly Pedestrian Life of Christopher Chaos was, dare I say, oddly pedestrian. I read the first 3 issues. I love this little blue-haired twinkie. He's very funny, but I could not tell you why I was supposed to care about any of the characters in this comic, and I dropped it. The Question, all along the Watchtower. I know that some people who love Renee Montoya, Jess Bragg being one of them, this is not going to be like enough Renee Montoya for them. The thing you need to understand is this is about a mystery on the Watchtower, and it's part of these interconnected all-in books, along with it's very connected to Challengers of the Unknown, but it's also connected to Black Lightning, and it's also connected to the Atom Project. But I love this. It's basically saying, like, what is the Watchtower infected with? Can Renee Montoya put it together fast enough to save herself, to save Batwoman, to save the Challengers of the Unknown, and to save this whole new Justice League? I love that it's happening in the shadows in this issue, quite literally, of the Watchtower. And so it's beneath the notice of Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman. Their eyes are on something much larger. That's why Renee Montoya is here. I love that she gets to be a badass and do things rough and her way, but at the same time that comes to bite her. I'm totally engaged with the mystery. I think Alex Segura is writing it really well. Cian Tormey is an incredible artist. I always love Romulo Fajardo Jr.'s colors, and they're so like vivid and popping and cartooning, and great letters from Dave Sharp. This is all Wynd for me. But the thing is, you just need to adjust your mind to know that this is the question investigating the Justice League. It's not a pure Renee Montoya question book. It's question by way of Justice League. Okay, my reaction to this might surprise you. This is Rogue, the Savage Land, written by Tim Seeley with art from Zulema Scotto Lavina, colors from Rachel Rosenberg, and letters by Ariana Mayer. This retcon nonsense was amazing. I was obsessed. Tim Seeley, of course, is a pro. He's got his own indie empire. He writes Hack Slash. He writes Logo Man. He knows what he's doing. Tim Seeley, in one page of this comic, gets Rogue's voice more right than Gail Simone has in 6 months. Tim Seeley gets it. She can be Southern, but still speak in that specific poetry that Claremont wrote for her. Also, I was afraid that this art was not going to stand up, because this comic absolutely wraps around Uncanny X-Men 269, a classic Jim Lee issue that I took the staples out of so I could trace the pages when I was 11-year-old. So my copy, no longer in near mint condition. But I think the vividness of the colors from Rachel Rosenberg really makes it work, even though this art style is not Jim Lee at all. And this is a true reason to write a retcon series. We know that Rogue went through a lot in the Savage Land, and it all happened off panel. We only got a couple of glimpses in it in this issue and in 274, and really not a whole lot else, because that was during Extinction Agenda and the setup to get us to Muir Island. So to take this period and like do a deep dive on it, it's the period where Rogue and Magneto eventually and originally fell for each other, and to like expand that and give us something that feels totally of Rogue's voice at that time. Brilliant. This is one of the things that have always begged to be done a retcon of. And if Tim Seeley keeps hitting it as hard as he hit it in this series, this is going to be an all-timer that I will proudly put into a Crushing Comics guide right after Uncanny X-Men 269 to say, please pause here and read Rogue the Savage Land, because then it will help you understand what happened off panel. I love this book. I cannot wait to hear what you all think of it. Usually I'm not into these retcon books, but I think Tim Seeley's voice for Rogue is amazing. He's so good. I know he's busy making his own money doing Hack Slash and Local Man and all that stuff, but could we get Tim Seeley writing an X-Men mainline flagship title? He would crush it. The voice in this is so good. So good. Look, I did 2 pages of art because I was so into it. Look at that Magneto. Look at his hand and his cape filling the panel, and then it like zooming out from him, and love it. And it was funny, and it sounded like Rogue, and it was funny without just being a character. Total win. Here's our other Spawn Universe comic for the week. This is The Scorched, which is the Rogue team, or the Spawn team. This is by Layman. What's his first name? John Layman. And it's got art by Steven Segovia, who I really enjoy, and letters from Underworld Design, colors by Danae Ribeiro. This was really good. I was going to wait to catch up on this because I read the first 3 or 4 issues of The Scorched, not by Todd McFarlane. And I was like really into it. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'm just going to like make my way all the way through. But I said, you know what? I think this is the start of a new trade. It's clearly got a clean start. I'm just going to check it out and see what I liked. I'm really into it because Layman does this cool thing where the whole issue feels like a recap because he keeps looking back in time and then jumping forward. I thought it was just recapping the whole prior issue. So then I went back and tried to read the prior issue, like, oh, this stupid book's recapping and stuff. No, the prior issue was a totally different story. This was just a device he was using. Layman right now, I think he's having like a resurgence because we're going to get to Titans in like 1 or 2 letters. And I love that book too. This is really fun. I would not just say pick it up here. I would say if you want to read Spawn Universe at all, you're Spawn curious at all, just start with Scorched #1 because it's all of the stuff that's the Todd McFarlane had been doing with Spawn for like the last 30 or 40 issues, but it's focused into a team book with multiple characters. It's not just on Spawn, and it's not written by Todd McFarlane. Ting, that makes it great. Todd, really, call me. Okay. This looked really cool. It's called Sectars, Warriors of Simbi something. It's covered by his arm, so I don't know. It's part of the Nacelle-verse. I don't know what that means. At first, I thought it was like a toy of some kind. I'm not sure if it is, but this cover, this art is really like gripping. But I just didn't know. It made it sound like it was like jumping into something that already existed, and I just had so many books in my pull already. But I find myself, is it like the Micronauts? I don't know. I find myself very, very intrigued. We'll do one or two more, then we'll break and chat with some comments. This is Shadow of the Golden Crane, issue number 1 from Dark Horse Comics. It's part of the world of Hellboy. Story by Chris Robertson, art by Michael Avon Oeming, who I don't usually like, but more on that in a second. Colors by Chris O'Halloran and letters by Clem Robbins. Maybe this makes me sound like a total moron, but this book could have done a better job of explaining to me that it is a Hellboy book. Like, I know it says from the world of Hellboy. And I know Hellboy's on the cover, but it's very much like a Hellboy adventure in the 1950s, but it just happens to center on this other character who was adventuring with him in the 1950s. I really liked it. Oeming's art, which sometimes can just get a little like too squashed and weird and triangle for me. I think here he was trying to tack a little closer to Mignola, and it really, really worked. It was funny. I was engaged. I will say a lot of it happens in flashback as we're getting the story of this mythology of monster hunters in China, who knowledge that our main character has of them from her family is helping her understand the monster that Hellboy is fighting in the present. But I'm hoping not every issue is going to be stuffed with that much flashback. And I loved it. I really like Hellboy in general. I think this was executed really well. It was readable, even though I don't know really anything, because I've never read any Hellboy from like the 1950s period of Hellboy. It was really easy for me to understand. So like, is this series going to be in the next one of these? Because I don't even know what this, it's still in the wrapper clearly. But Chris Roberson did write stuff in this, and I don't know what's in it because it doesn't say. Maybe I should open it. So like maybe this is like one of those kinds of series that's going to be in the next one of this. Eventually I'm going to do my Hellboy read, and it's all going to happen for me. But I just refuse to be rushed. All right, let's see. What does this say that it collects? It just says stories. You're not helping me very much, book. And then it just goes right in. Secret Nature. It doesn't actually say fully what it collects. Well, that's confusing. Maybe I need to go work. Gosh, it smells great. Maybe I need to go work on a Hellfire or a Hellboy guide when I'm done huffing my books. Okay, I'm saying Hellfire because our next book is Spirits of Vengeance. But first, there's some stuff I didn't read. But first, let's see what you've been talking about. That's me. So when you're in music theory class, which I took to get my music minor, you learn a bunch of aural training, that's ear training, to recognize intervals, and different songs that we all know and love have certain intervals of them. Like Here Comes the Bride, the wedding song. Here comes the bride, all dressed in white. That's a fourth. And so when you get that locked into your head, you always will be able to recognize a fourth. Star Wars is a fifth. Ba, 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 ba. That first ba, ba is a fifth, right? So the Star Trek, the classic Star Trek William Shatner theme song, I forget offhand. I think it's not a spa. Da, da. Is it a minor seventh? Max would have to chime in here. But anyway, it's just one of those songs that I have in my head. And so whenever I'm pausing, instead of saying I just start humming the Star Trek theme. Crisis lore. Okay. Going back. Thoughts on a Dazzler Omni. Love it. Obviously, Electric X Alpha. I haven't read it in the Omni. It's around here somewhere. I haven't read it in the Omni yet, but of course I love it because it's Dazzler. But I like Dazzler. I like that period of Marvel. My love of it is well documented. Dazzler's so underrated. Great story and drama with action. That's the thing. Nick N nails it. Like, I think people think it's going to be either a mutant book or like a silly like chick book, whatever that means. But no, it's just like a really cool dramatic book about somebody trying to be a hero and also trying to be famous and also just like live her life, right? Royale, I'm glad that you're catching the live stream. Best writer for Emma Frost. Okay, so we did some of this. Super Panda says, is Hoxpox the best read for somebody that hasn't read any X-Men past Astonishing X-Men and New X-Men? I think yes. If you go to the Krakoa page on Crushing Crisis, which is kind of hidden, I'll admit, but you'll find it. You'll get there. If you go to the Krakoa page on Crushing Crisis, I pick the 20 stories you need to understand to pick up Hoxpox. And I think if you have a really good grounding in Grant Morrison's new X-Men and you kind of know who the players are, I think you're going to understand it. You, because you've only read 2000s era stuff, will be missing one main character, but the book's going to explain who it is. I pick it up. Look, if you can't get excited from X-Men based on Hoxpox, it's a very specific thing, and maybe you just don't like Hickman, but it's exciting. So like I would say just go for it. Ram V is Grant Morrison for me, if that makes sense, says Zero Zaku. No, I totally get what you're saying. Everybody's got their own person that's like their poet of comics, and Ram V is turning into that. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Zero Zaku says Dawn Runner so good. I haven't read that yet because it was during my like outage where I really wasn't reading as many comics. Super Panda says subscribed. I've been stuck reading the X line from the beginning and want to read something modern. Yeah, I hear you. I would say start with Hoxpox. Or maybe before you start with Hoxpox, just to like read like a fun popcorn series, read X-Men Red by Tom Taylor, which brings Jean Grey back. You don't have to know why she's back, but since you had just read 2 comic runs that are all about how she's dead, you might as well read X-Men Red with her back, and that will kind of get you grounded in the modern world of X-Men, and then read Hoxpox. But, you know, people are giving great comments without me having to explain it all. Kenneth Crowley says, Nightwing for me is just as good as Tom Taylor's run, but this current arc, I'll be honest, has stalled a bit. Yeah, I'm not saying I hate it. No, I'm saying I hate it. I hate it. But, you know, there's always hope. James Abel says, the question all along the Watchtower number 3 is some good horror vibes. Not sure about the main villain. Lance J. McNair, hey, Lance, says that they echo what Expose said, because they're talking about if you should pick up Hoxpox. Look, if you want advice on where to pick up the X-Men, apparently in the comments and in the chat, people are going off. Did people love Rogue? Nick N said, did we really need this Rogue series? According to me, yes. Kenneth Crowley says, Rogue the Savage Land's so good, the artwork amazing, loved it. Lance McNair says, the Rogue art is awesome. Rogue's my favorite X-Men. Then you better pick up this series, my friend. The artist formerly known as Jesse Say What says great to catch a live stream and is great to be caught. And Nick End agrees that they will give Rogue a chance. Moonin loving Shadows of the Golden Crane, that Hellboy series I was just talking about. Y'all, we got to keep going because I am running out of voice and we got some comments left, Law. No, I'm not going to look up another Hellboy reading order. I'm going to figure it out myself. But thank you, Moonin. So for anybody who doesn't have the patience to wait another 3 years for me to do a Hellboy reading order, you can do the Hellboy Universe reading orders by Julix with an X. All right, let's get this wrapped up, shall we? Because we're at the 2-hour mark, and that's when we all start getting tired. Maybe I'm just talking about me. Skin Police. I think the thing is I looked at the pitch for it and it didn't really resonate for me, but then I started feeling bad because it was one of the only things I hadn't read this week, but maybe in the future. Space Ghost is Space Ghost. I don't really have an attraction to this character or this writer, David Papose. Space Usagi, I one day will read all of Usagi from the beginning. This week is not that week. Spirits of Vengeance. Okay, this is interesting. So what Sabir Pirzada is trying to do with this series, Sabir Pirzada, by the way, you know him as a writer on Ms. Marvel and writing Ms. Marvel comic, is trying to draw all of the Ghost Riders together into a family of Ghost Riders, very similar to what DC is doing with putting all of their comics in a family right now, which I think really, really works. Some of the issues in the series have just been, but issue 2 was really, really great. So it's not that Sabir Pirzada doesn't have an idea of what to do or like a plot. I think he might be trying to do a little bit too much in the series all at once. But this issue, it really worked. It had the hallmarks of what I want from a Ghost Rider comic, which is that there's ghosts, spirits of vengeance. People think they have the upper hand on them, but it doesn't quite work out. And there's a bigger plot dealing with bigger vengeance, but it has action that tracks. I think the last 2 issues, the action was getting a little hard to follow because if you have too many riders and too many flaming skulls and too many ghosts of vengeance, it's just hard to really follow. This one really got there for me. I do think Andrew Dahlhaus, who is like one of my favorite colorists, he's doing such a desaturated color look here. I wish everything just popped a lot more. This is a very kind of grayish page, and I get you're trying to give like otherworldly supernatural a little bit, but it was just a little too gray for me. I would say if you like Ghost Rider and you've been wanting a good Ghost Rider comic, I really liked Ed Brison's Ghost Rider in like 2021, 2022, and then the Benjamin Percy stuff didn't really hit for me. Read issue 2 of this and see if you like it. I don't think issues 4 and 5, or was this 5? I don't think issues 3 and 4 were that great, but I loved 2, and I found this issue 5 to be pretty appealing. Standstill from Image, such an interesting book. It's like all double-page spreads. It's an 8-issue series about what if this total D-bag got the power to briefly stop time. It's by Lee Loughridge. I read the first issue. It was just like a little too acerbic and mean for me. I have this thing that I call the asshole test that I do, especially in indie comics. Whereas if your comic is really good storytelling and really good art and a really interesting story, but the main character is an asshole, and at the end of the first issue, I go, God, I hope that asshole dies. Then I'm usually done reading your comic book. I don't have that part of me that loves watching something like Breaking Bad or Mad Men where like everybody's terrible and I want to see what terrible things they get up to. My brain just shuts off. Maybe it's like a neurotypical thing. I don't know. But if the main character just seems like a meanie to me, like I just don't keep reading. So the first issue of this, it was really cool. I liked it because it was offensive in a way that was punching laterally. It wasn't really punching up. It wasn't really punching down. It was a really great sequence in a leather bar that I thought was going to be offensive to my personal tastes and morals and values. But then it actually wound up being really funny. I think Lee Loughridge is doing a good job. I couldn't get into the character. Star Trek Lower Decks, as I think I mentioned last week, I am just a Star Trek screen viewer. I don't feel the need to read about it. Star Wars, I feel the need to read about, but oh my gosh, I feel the need to never read another comic book by Alex Segura again after reading this, which is funny because he's crushing it on the question. This was the biggest waste of my time. I'm not going to go there. I don't need 60 seconds. You heard me tear into it last week. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Nothing is happening. They had 12 issues to tell us the cool story of the thing that's happening directly after the Return of the Jedi. And instead, we just had people arguing back and forth about like which part of the Empire do we think we ought to be fighting. It's so stupid. The script is so bad. It's such a waste of the Star Wars IP. Alex Segura, I really dig your writing on a lot of comic books. I don't think you should be allowed to write any other Star Wars comic books. Okay, Storm. I'm going to take the unusual step of using the 60 seconds to read you my actual review notes, which I wrote after reading this issue by Murawa Ayodele, Lucas Wernick, colors from Alex Guimarães and Ferris Fuentes Sojo, and letters from Travis Lanham, to explain to you why I love this comic book so much. So let me just scroll up to my notes and I'm just going to read it because I don't think I am going to capture the full glory of this for you if I don't actually read words that I've already written. Okay, where are those words? Let's just search. I know, after all that buildup and then I don't have it ready. I'm still learning, okay? Here we go. Storm, number 4, for me, is a 5 out of 5 perfect comic book. When I say a comic book reads like a poem, the thing that I mean is that it's not operating on a typical comics pace or using a typical comics language. Poems have internal structure. Sometimes that's prescribed, a sonnet. Sometimes it's loosely defined, a song. Sometimes it changes from line to line, like free verse. But even if a poem does not literally rhyme or have a measured meter, it often has little moments of reflection, tiny echoes, threads that connect it back to itself. A story has those things too, yes. But in a story, the threads are sinew, they're bones, they're muscle, they're architecture. A poem is much looser than all that. It's not a story engine, it's wind. It's a whirlwind, barely contained by words. So when I tell you that this comic to me is like a poem, that's what I'm talking about. Ayodele and Wernick are making something that is recognizably a comic book, but they're not following the rules of comic book stories with dogged devotion. This is a dinner with doom. It's about food, taste, sensation, memories. The conflict is not between Doom and Storm. The conflict is Doom's ego and Storm's willpower, each of them operating independently, separately from one another, but pulling into conflict because they are such huge forces in a room, in a weather system, on a planet. And that willpower is literally and has been prophesied to be the death of Storm here. After this issue, we'll be on unsteady ground. I'm intrigued to see if Ayodele can keep this up because it's an epic poem of a comic book. And as of right now, I do believe wholeheartedly it is pulled into the lead as Marvel's best comic, and there is nothing else that comes particularly close. So that's what I have to say about Storm. I don't think I could say anything else. It was perfect. It was perfect. It was perfect in a way. There are a lot of comics at DC that are doing this. That's the other thing. This is perfect in a way that New Gods is perfect. This is perfect in a way that Absolute Superman is perfect. DC is right now giving writers a longer leash to do different things with structure, with tone. Marvel is really locked into a very specific kind of storytelling right now, and very few things are deviating from it. Because this is deviating, and it's deviating with such sureness and certainty, it is really attractive to me, but it just feels like a lot of DC books right now. It's the most DC Marvel book right now, I would say. Okay, moving on, because oh my gosh, we need to be done. You saw this comic sneak into my top 10 this week. What the hell? It came out 6 years ago. It's on Global Comics, so you could go read it there, but now it's coming out as single issues from Laguna Studios. It's written by John Pence with pencils by Zachary Dolan, inks by Laurie Foster, colors by Eve Rosso, and letters from Tyler Esposito. It's so cool. So if you like Geoff Johns' Geiger, it's that. It's just exactly what Johns is doing in Geiger, but with the perspective of somebody different. In this book, we're in this kind of post-apocalypse world. We don't know what the apocalypse was, only that it started on the East Coast. I didn't start the timer, but whatever. And this woman is a traveling medic. She's one of the few doctors who didn't go underground to preserve herself from this apocalypse that's above ground. And she goes from town to town looking for them, flying the medical flag to see if she can help them. But she brooks no bullshit. If you mess with her, she will mess you up just as quickly as she will heal you. She doesn't trust you. She's good with a gun and a sword, and she has a complete lack of optimism about this world. But that does not mean she's not personally optimistic about the people she can save. This character came out so fully formed, so fast for me. I fell in love with her so quick. This had so many fun, funny setups that put her at risk and put the morals of the other characters in question, but it kept swerving ever so slightly, so it never just turned into that book that I was expecting it to be. I love it. I'm hooked. I might just go and binge all of it on Global Comics because it's already there, but this is why I read indie comics. Great ideas, great art, great writing, and a character who didn't need to exposit to me about shit. It just was clear who she was the whole time, and I immediately clocked into who that was and loved it. Titans on Ice. This is written, as I mentioned slightly earlier, by John Layman with art from Serge Acuna, who killed it. Colors from Matt Herms, who also killed it, and letters from Wes Abbott, who also killed it. This creative team is rocking. It is absolutely standing up to what Tom Taylor is doing. This was another one-shot story showing how villains in the orbit of the Titans who are minor are doing minor things that are impacting the Titans in major ways because an old villain is coming to get them. This art was every bit as good as the art that was on the Tom Taylor run, which is crazy to say because the art was so great. I love the focus on Killer Frost, who is a character I really, really enjoy, and I was sad that she had to get used this way, but when you make me sad for using a character I love well, that's a good kind of sadness. This book, it's just so fun, and I think that Layman absolutely gets the voices of every one of the Titans, whereas I feel like Taylor really was lingering on Nightwing and Raven and didn't really develop the other Titans as much. Here, I feel like everybody absolutely lives on the page. If you haven't read Tom Taylor's Titans, read it. Read Beast World too, because it was great, but you could just pick up from the beginning of All In because Layman is doing a terrific job. I've liked Layman. I've been okay with Layman. He's having a resurgence right now. He might be just hot right now. I don't think he can write a bad book at the moment. Ultimate Wolverine. I think this one's going to be controversial with you all. Chris Condon, writer, Alessandro Cappuccio, artist, colors from Brian Valencia, all totally brilliant. Unfortunately, I do not like this book because of the letters from Corey Petit, who's a pro letterer, but I feel like he's just on autopilot. We've never seen Alessandro Cappuccio's art like this because he was being colored by Rachel Rosenberg in Moon Knight, and it looked very, very different. The blacks were blacker. He was maybe doing thicker lines. It just looked much more of a polish and a shine. Here, it's got much more texture, and I love it. And this story from Chris Condon is so cool. Like, who would Wolverine be in this universe with the Maker, who clearly would have a vested interest and keeping an eye on Logan? And it turns out we do have eyes on him. This is Ultimate X-Men. If you've been reading Peach Momoko's Ultimate X-Men, and if you like it, great, I'm happy for you. But if you've been saying, like, where are the recognizable characters? Where's the X-Men kind of story, plotting, look, feel that I want? It's all in this issue. But these letters stand off too much from the background. They just look like they're like this totally different layer. They're too bold. They're too clear. They're too colorful. I know it's in the script to say, like, hey, let's have Wolverine's claw go schluck. But there's so much of it layered on top of this beautiful art, and it stands off of the art so much because there's no texture to it that it just looks like crap. And then at the end, there's this like really good voiceover that's supposed to really make us feel something. But the colors that are chosen in those letterboxes for the voiceover totally took me out of it. It's like this pale lilac color. And I know why they chose that for the character, but it totally fought with all the warm colors on the page and not fought in a conceptual way, which it should have, but fought and like it's making my eyes vibrate. I think Corey Petit needs to take a breath, step back, look what the art actually looks like, and try a different approach to the coloring to the lettering, because he's a great letterer, but it didn't work. And it took me out of so many pages on this comic book where I found myself just staring at the letters and going, why? This is a great example. The braca is fine, but it just doesn't meld with the art at all. I feel like I want something that looks a little more hand lettered and something that looks a little more hand colored. ultimately. Great story, though. And for those of you who are not lettering nerds like I am, you are probably going to love it. I could not find this anywhere, and I want to read it so bad. Vampire Unicorn Hunter. So it's a vampire hunting a unicorn, a hunter hunting a vampire unicorn, whatever it is, pump it straight into my veins because I am all about this stupid kind of BS. And I can't find it anywhere digital. It didn't seem to be in Global Comics. It's not on Comixology. I think it was a Kickstarter, but like it must exist somewhere. So, and I think at one point it was a Scout Comics book, but maybe they pulled it from Scout because Scout had all that controversy. If you can figure out where to find it digitally, tell me. The Walking Dead is continuing. This is the color version. Just as a note, if you are reading it, have read it originally, and you're like, why would I get it in color? It has all this cool back matter in every issue that wasn't in the originals, and they're absolutely not collecting it, I don't think, until it's like all the way done. So the only way to get it is as singles or digital singles. I didn't read What If Galactus Transforms Moon Knight, but I am going to read it next week because it is Galactus Transforming Rogue, and it's by Ann Nocenti, so you know it's going to be weird. And then Witchblade, I think this might be my final book of the week. Sometimes you root for a writer or an artist and you've been rooting for them, and we've all been rooting for them for over a decade, and they just never get there. And I'm afraid that maybe is the case for Marguerite Bennett, because this feels like every other Marguerite Bennett comic book I've ever read, but it's Witchblade, and it's a whole new reboot of Witchblade and an all new continuity that kind of strips away a lot of the things we didn't need about her and gets right to the heart of the story much quicker. And this teases a little bit of the darkness, but he just is there in passing to sell you the cover. But this is the first issue of Witchblade that has felt like a proper superhero action comic, and I liked it for that reason. The art from Giuseppe Cofaro with colors by R.F. Pranto, really, really good. Good letters from Troy Pieteri. But I do think that there's a little bit of a scope problem here where like we build up this really cool confrontation, but then Marguerite Bennett tries to make it like a whole like many-on-one fight, when actually what we've really needed this whole time is to just see Witchblade in like one fight and against one person. But I think this really brings together this, and the previous issue 6 really, really ties together what the series is about and why you should like it better than 2 through 5 did. I would almost say read issue 1 and then just read issue 6 and 7. I really was having trouble with 2 through 5, but I always have trouble with Marguerite Bennett's pacing. Maybe people love her. Just because I don't like something doesn't mean it's bad for everyone, except for Todd McFarlane. You're objectively bad. I should edit you. But I know I'm not going to get a job that way, but that's okay. I'm not going to get a job with Todd McFarlane anyway. I might as well bully him. So so maybe if you have always loved Marguerite Bennett, this would really, really work for you, but it's almost working. I'm hanging in there by a thread because I really almost dropped it after 5. Actually, so I'm a Wynd. I'm obsessed with Wynd. It's one of my favorite comics of all time. I have all the hardcovers right here. I will not be rushed. So I will catch up with this possibly in hardcover when it eventually comes out in hardcover. Sorry about it, but this is the only book in my poll that I didn't actually read this week. This one I did read. I know it's by Scott Snyder, and I don't always like Scott Snyder, and I have no idea what this thing is. D-List Larry? Who is D-List Larry? Is that like a Larry that's not as good as Larry Library, who's the A-List Larry? I don't know what D-List Larry is. But so this is a comic book by Scott Snyder and Jock, who did Witches together and did some Batman stuff together. I actually really like it. I think as much as I whine and moan about Scott Snyder, I think it's because I don't really like how he paces superhero stuff and supernatural universes, although it's ever so slightly supernatural. I like him just writing about people. And this is about a person. It's about this guy who went to be in the FBI and like investigate serial killers, and now he's got a tumor. It's a tumor, and it's affecting his memory. So his memory can't be trusted, and he's like trying to decide how he's not going to go gently into this night. But there's this one serial killer. Not only did he never catch, but he never proved was real. And a little tickler comes back to show us maybe it was real all along. I think it's incredibly well made. I love the voice. I love the pacing. Jock's art is beautiful with colors from Lee Loughridge and Jock. Letters by World Design. It's very, very readable. I think if you like serial killer books, which we discovered last week is a trope that I love, that this book could be for you. And I think Jock's art was much tighter than I'm used to Jock's art being, which I found very appealing. I also didn't read this book, The Young Nomads. I don't know. The pitch wasn't too strong. Oh, and then there was The Fair and Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which is an in-continuity prequel to the new cartoon of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, but I don't really read a lot of out-of-continuity Marvel, so I didn't read it. And folks, we made it. So glad we made it. Look how far we've come now, baby. Okay, so let me go to some comments, and then I'm going to put the AMA banner up, and then we're going to be done, because this is a too long stream. Lance McNair said, I'm early in the original Secret Wars, which I told you to read last week. I told you didn't have to read, but I liked last week. I'm not only enjoying the event, but I'm surprised when remembering how many important stories came out about it. That's why I get so angry when people, especially my friends in Near Mint Condition, are like, that wasn't any good. That was never good. Yes, it was good. It has a lot of really interesting stories, and it really progressed a lot of the characters in an interesting way. And I think people just have a chip on their shoulder because it had toys and it was by Jim Shooter, but it had Mike Zeck art. It was beautiful. I mean, it was a really cool series. And I think it reads well today. It's heavy, it's dense, and Hickman is devoted to it. Hickman, I am convinced, has every word of it memorized, and you can always see echoes of it in Hickman's work. Sniffing the books. Let's huff that book one more time. Am I going to get demonetized for huffing? I don't think I'm monetized anyway right now because I haven't put up enough videos. Super Panda just finished Secret Wars and enjoyed it more than most. Yeah, you got to just experience it for yourself. I think people with the chip on their shoulder are people who like read it originally or even read it in the 90s or 2000s and like just have this opinion of it. But I think it's a really great comic book. More new book huffers. Nick M loves huffing new books. And I did not sing an octave. An octave would be somewhere. Star Trek is maybe I was singing it too high, but it's not an octave. I think it's either a minor 6 or minor 7. Larry's the library loves the music theory talk and loves Star Trek. Yakura asks thoughts on finally upcoming all new X-Men omnibus. Omar just announced it last night on Dear Mint Condition. For me, it's a modern starting point for X-Men as someone who's never read X-Men before. I disagree. I think it's a closed loop of teen X-Men who never made sense in the real world, would have been fine for a miniseries, and have nowhere to go once you get over the haha, they're in the real world and Iceman is gay quality to them. But I don't love Bendis to begin with, and I don't love time travel stuff, so I'm the wrong person to ask. In terms of mapping, they should have found a way to put Battle of the Atom in it. Maybe Battle of the Atom is going to be collected in full in the Uncanny X-Men volume by Bendis, which they're inevitably going to do now. I think personally they should have just put 2 volumes with Uncanny X-Men threaded together with all new X-Men, because I just think they interact so heavily. But I get it would be messy. I get back Bendis is not Hickman, and historically they've collected Bendis stuff separately, even when he does that interwoven stuff. And Battle of the Atom ultimately is not that important to the all-new team. I think if you like the idea of the all-new X-Men, read it. And then read, skip the next one by Dennis Hopeless because it sucked. Then read X-Men Blue in Resurrection, then read Extermination. You have a big complete story, which I think really would be satisfying. Okay. There's another Space Usagi out now. Apparently, I'm loving Spirits of Vengeance, says Nick N. I appreciate the revival of the Midnight Suns. It's not perfect, but it scratches the flaming itch. You maybe should see a doctor about that, but I agree. I do think that this series, I don't want to just read one Ghost Rider, and I don't want to read a bunch of Ghost Riders being super, super brutal and bloody, because I don't want it to be a Red Band book. That's not what it was. Just give me Ghost Rider getting vengeance. That's what the book's supposed to be about, and I think it's so close. It's so close to what I want. I just think it's meandered a little bit, but I really did like this week's issue. Not a huge Percy, but yeah, Percy on Ghost Rider, I think just tried to make it more dire and like bloody and like dark and cool and about sex than it needed to be. Ghost Rider is that dark, but it's not a bloody dark. It's a flames dark. Flames on the side of my face. What are people thinking about Storm? James Abel, Storm 4, a story that is leap from the pages. Artwork so breathtakingly beautiful. A great ending, the best X-Men and comic this week. Right on, James. The page with Doom's castle and the lighting in the background. Wow, I want that as a print. Chef's kiss. How about Storm in the dress and the staircase? I love that it's such an interesting and well-scripted comic that we can take a moment and just have like splash pages. That's what I mean about it being a poem. The pace of it's so interesting. Like even that flashback to Storm as a little kid Storm in this issue, from most people, I would hate that. But the way that that it got eased into, and then the way it was paced and the way we popped out of it made it work. And that's what I mean about it being a poem. Eric Garza saying Storm is amazing. Then on my no assholes rule, Lance McNair says, I can read about asshole characters if the story arc goes somewhere interesting, but it's usually not my preference, and I feel the purpose is just meanness and I hate it. That's exactly how I feel. You nailed it. Nick N submits to our wishes and we'll get Storm and trade paperback. Lance says the asshole rule applies to movies and TV as well. Me too. And also, Lance loved issue number 1 of Storm. Now my favorite villain, Doom, is showing up for a dinner scene. Definitely going to keep reading, as you should, because it's amazing. Super Panda is getting really sold in this book because I'm selling it hard. Lucas Wernick, who I like to begin with, especially with Kieran Gillen scripting him, has really, really leveled up. By the way, we're going to do like a 2-minute lightning round AMA. So if you have things to ask me quick, because then we got to wrap this up. James, the Surgeon, Did I say, what did I say? The sturgeon? Who knows? Super Panda, I don't even know what's coming out of my mouth once we're past 2 hours into me talking by myself. James Abel says, Ultimate Wolverine #1, best Wolverine comic I've read in years. Nightcrawler better come back. This is What If the Winter Soldier is Wolverine. Yes, perfect logline. Books should have logline. Logline means like a single line pitch, like elevator pitch. If a book has a logline that's really, really tight, it's easy to love. Wolverine is What If Wolverine is the Winter Soldier? What if Winter Soldier is Wolverine? That's all you need to know. Kenneth Crawley says Titans is really good. And the fact that they went up versus Killer Frost, amazing. Loved her in the Flash TV series. The character of Caitlin Snow is amazing. Yeah, I really, really like Killer Frost. I liked when she was in Suicide Squad. I liked when she was in DC Superhero Girls. So I like that she's kind of in the league, but that little worry of doubt in the back of her mind got planted, got exploited here. Really, really great. Hey, I'm not alone hating the letters in Ultimate Wolverine. Pizzanat.org. Oh, pizzanat.org agrees on the letters. If you scan out and look from far, it looks so weird. Yeah, they just didn't like drive at the page. Tyler says, I love that Ultimate Wolverine did not even attempt to introduce the characters to us and just assume you're reading this book, you know they are, done. And you know what? As much as I hate a book that gets your attention by killing characters willingly, I think to start an Ultimate Universe book because of how this Ultimate Universe is set up and to say, hey, you know what? We're just going to start with killing a few characters that you really, really like because that's going to set the scene for who this Wolverine is and what we're dealing with. I think that's fine. I just thought Chris Condon's script crackled. I really, really, really thought the script was great. James Abel filling us in on What If Galactus transformed Moon Knight. Boring. Okay. Alex missed most of the show, but you'll catch the replay. And hello to you, Alex. Hopefully that's not Alex Segura, because I just said some really mean things if it was about you. But any other Alex, totally cool and happy you're here. Sasmer says, What If is a series I'm only getting because of the Ron Lynn covers. The covers are pretty cool. Nick N says he really wants to like Witchblade and looking forward to Darkness. Yeah, I have a lot of affection for it. All of the hardcovers are on my shelf right here. So I'm really pulling for it, and I'm always willing to give people a chance. Just because I didn't like Marguerite Bennett 8 years ago doesn't mean I'm not going to like her now, and I'm always willing to come back. But when you're doing the same crap that you were doing 10 years ago, but I was having problems with your script then, which is like pacing thing, too much internal monologue with no action, like comics where I couldn't even tell you what the whole issue was about, then I start to get frustrated. Yeah, I think the McFarlane smack talk is going to become an ongoing bit, I think. It's Distillery. Now I can't delist Larry. Look, if they're not going to deign to spell the name of their comic company, I'm going to infer whatever I want to infer about it, and it's going to be something different every time. And James Abel did read Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man #2. Nico seems like a good character. What the F? Another Spider-Man origin story? Like, I haven't read this 100 times before. Yeah, I hear ya. News Bully Channel says, this is my first 2-hour live stream on this channel. Usually I catch the stream as it's ending. Well, thank you for hanging in. I am hungry, tired, and out of voice, and we're about to wrap this up. But it's Nick N says it's never too long to me. I want to listen forever. Well, it gets too long for me to talk, but I really could spend all the time talking with comics with all of you. Hey, Richard Fearing, hopes I had a good weekend and I'm well. I am well. Not much to report on. I really didn't do my, how was my week? I was busy. I had so much work to do, and then I had so much Crushing Crisis to do, and then I was on 4 streams last week. 4. So I just was so busy. Okay, a few questions, and then we're going to wrap up. Kenneth Kelly Jr. says, Crisis question, reading the original Crisis on Infinite Earth storyline, what was my thoughts on this? I didn't watch any of the CW TV shows. Crisis lore, I do not watch much TV. I have to read all these comics and do all these comic guides, and I'm a parent, and I have this YouTube channel now. I do not have time to watch TV. I'm so sorry. I watched a little bit of season 1 of Green Arrow, and that was really it. I really have not watched a whole lot of TV. Except for kind of prestige TV every so often since I had Kid Crisis, which is 11 years. Lance McNair, which DC finest have you been reading? I haven't read any of them yet. I got the first 4 because I had an IST order ready to happen that I just could throw them in, and I started pre-ordering them for DCBS for next month. So I just right after last week's stream made an order that has all the interstitial ones that I missed. I think the first one I will read will probably be Flash, because I've never read that early Silver Age Flash. I was talking to Jess about it on Omnidog's Vault last week, but I'm really excited to read Supergirl because I've never read Silver Age Supergirl, and it's the first Supergirl. It's literally her origin. So those are the 2 I'm really excited. I've read some Golden Age Batman and Superman before. I've read all different Wonder Woman before. So I think the ones that are newest to me are going to be Flash and Supergirl. Stupidest question in the stream. I apologize in advance. How do you prefer to be called on stream? Crisis Peter, GAOT. I like to be Crisis Online because It lets me know the context that people know me by. I'm not going to get like upset if anybody calls me Peter, but Krisis kind of is like the online heightened screaming about Todd McFarlane persona of me. And I've been Krisis forever. I've been Krisis online since 1997. So if you were to say, if we were in a crowded room and I heard the Peter, I might like be like, oh, maybe there's another Peter here. But if I heard Krisis, I would know you were talking to me. And it is related to my middle name. So it's very much my name as much as Peter. And so I respond to it, basically, is my story. I sang an octave, fight me. Fine. I'm pretty sure I was trying to sing a minor 6, which would be... Yeah, but I will look into... Clearly, I'm not getting that... Or a minor 7th? I think I was trying to sing a minor 7th, and that's why it was an octave. There you go. Okay. My favorite Superman omnibus, Triangle Years 1. Have a sing-off Pure. Max's voice is beautiful. So you have to subscribe to Max's channel. Here's another channel that I'm not going to be able to put into the comics for you fast enough. But Max is, it's going to be my history. Max is, I convinced him to put more music on his channel because he always introduces himself by saying like, oh, I'm that guy that does music. And then it's like, well, why aren't you putting regular music on your channel? He's this amazing degreed music theorist and guitarist. And he's so good. So I got him to agree for a few weeks to do a new song on his channel every Sunday. So it's usually going to be up by this stream. And that's his channel. So go check it out. And right now he's doing Beatles Bop, where he's doing Beatles songs, but he's doing versions of them that are kind of like jazz bop. And he actually sent me the tab of this week's Beatles song, and I was playing it last night way too late when I should have been getting ready for the show. Storm is an ongoing. Logan Wayne. Reaper X, will I bring back the bandana one day? The first day my hair doesn't look good when I let it out of the little bun I keep it in before this. The bandana will be back. Trust and believe. Lance Ixnair, Krisis, any X-Men characters you think are relatively underutilized? Do you think Magic has potential to be as popular as Wolverine? I think Magic has huge untapped potential. She's like the magical girl of X-Men, and and she's one of the young characters, and I really think huge potential there. I think a lot of Generation X really went underused, and Hickman understood that, and Hickman loved Generation X, which is why he brought back Sync. So I think Sync has a lot of that potential. I think Dani Moonstar has just never... She's so rarely used as well as she could be used. So I really think there's a lot that can be done with her. And I think Eva Bell, who we just saw in that Time Slide special, Eva Bell has so much cool stuff. I mean, we should have like Eva Bell should be part of Cable's cast. There should be like a time-swept X-Files-y X-Force book that is like Cable, Eva Bell, maybe Bishop, and like a couple other X-Men. That book could sell 50 issues. Have Al Ewing do his time nonsense on that. It would be amazing. Reaper's excited to try the new Witchblade. Hopefully I don't turn you off too much. It's I like it. And I think if you have affection for Witchblade, it will be pleasing. I just think the pacing was a little like grinding to a halt for me. The monologue by Nightcrawler was very good in Ultimate Wolverine. I agree. Mall 360. D-List Larry. Oh, I'm sorry. Distillery. Reaper X says Distillery will be in trouble doubling down with Diamond as their exclusive distributor. See, I don't know. I didn't even know what Distillery was until this weekend. I didn't know. Was it digital only? Was it a Comixology thing? I literally didn't know. I just was like, Scott Snyder, not my favorite, but Scott Snyder plus Jog, I do like. All right, we really got to be done. Logan Wayne, is there a writer who, if you see their name in a book, you instantly like, nope, and refuse to read it? Jeff Lemire. Well, Jeff Lemire on Indie, because I just know if I refuse to read a book, it's because either I know that I won't like it, or I mean, that's really it. There's no, even a writer, I mean, it could be a comic book by Charles Manson, but I separate art from artist. Like, so I will still go and read that book. But once a writer has pissed me off by doing the same trope over and over again, and the trope pisses me off, then I don't want to read the comic book. So Jeff Lemire, I just know I'm not going to like his indie books. Like I've been through it. We've established this. Marguerite Bennett is usually on this list, but because it's Witchblade, I went into it. David Papose is on that list. Nothing wrong. He might be the nicest person on the planet. I truly don't know, but I know his writing is not going to hit for me, but I will keep giving it a try. I think I try people initially when they're on indie, and then if I really understand they're not for me, I kind of give up. But then I will keep reading them when they do like work for hire and they do license stuff, because maybe eventually they'll click for me, and then I go back and I go, oh, maybe I will like them now. Cy Sperry was like that. I wouldn't read Cy Sperry for years because I hated the way he scripted, and then I happened to read him writing a Labyrinth series, and I loved it, and I was like, oh, I get it now. So I'm always open to I get it now. Reaper X says, every series will also run as long as readers demand it. Well, I'm going to keep demanding Storm forever, and I hope everybody else demands it. Reaper X also asks if I got in my morning swim or is it too early? No, actually, it's a holiday today in New Zealand. It's Wellington Day. Well, it's just Wellington Day in Wellington. Each big city has its own founding day, so the pool opened late. So I actually didn't go all last week. I was so busy. I was like in almost vomit from stress mode last week, not just because of the streams. So I am going to go back to swimming starting tomorrow. And folks, I have to wrap it up here. So I'm going to do a song. But I realized last week that you couldn't really see the guitar. And I know that a lot of the fun of not that I'm not Max, but a lot of the fun, oh gosh, whoa, that almost went badly. A lot of the fun of hearing and seeing somebody playing a song is seeing them play guitar. So I've been Krisis with a K. This has been your weekly Crushing Krisis Live. Next week, note to the faithful, it will not be at the same time, possibly. I have a thing that I might need to do next Monday morning. So keep an eye on the channel. I will put the stream up and say when the stream is going to be. But it almost certainly is not going to be at this regular time, but it will be Sunday. It might have to be Monday, but usually this will be the time. I'm on only one other stream this week, which is Near Mint Condition. We're going to be talking about the mapping of the blue and gold omnibus and why it works and why it doesn't work. I'll be doing my color-coded charts. That will be tomorrow at 2:30 in the afternoon. So please tune in if you're around, especially if you have the day off. And go on Crushing Krisis. The magic guide will be up for patrons later this week. If you have $1 or $2 to spare every week, I would say maybe throw it my way on Patreon. I will say last week I did have to upgrade Crushing Krisis's RAM and GPU cores because it's so popular. It has exploded. The site has exploded with popularity in the past 4 or 5 months in a way that I haven't seen since the beginning of the pandemic when everybody was just sitting at home and it was getting really slow. And I want people to have a good experience. So I just had to drop more money than I think you would credibly believe on a faster server for it because the site is that popular now, which is great. And I'm so thankful, but it costs money. So I'd really be happy if you would become my Patreon. I'm not going to see any more comments from here because as we learned last time, if I keep watching the comments, I will forget to sing the song. So this is a song of mine called Standing. And it is about high school, really. And my best friend coming out of high school, Gina, who became my co-writer and bandmate. And it's just about the relationship we've always had where we always lean on each other a little bit. But honestly, we'd be just fine standing on our own. So I've been Krisis from Crushing Krisis. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell because there's not a lot of videos from me. You might as well see them all. Go to crushingkrisis.com whenever you're wondering what trade paperback comes next or what issue is this in the trade paperback, and be here next week, maybe on Sunday, maybe on Monday, to see me once again. I value your time so much, and I'm glad that you spent it with me. Here we go. You're standing up slowly, standing all alone, and I can't help but thinking about it every time I see you straighten up, about your posture and my posturing, about how neither ever changes. If you are a swan, then I am a gray, ugly duckling waiting to be tucked under someone's wing, 'cause I don't have the grace of you, and it doesn't seem so complicated now. Not such a big deal, so complicated now. Now that those wounds have healed, it doesn't seem like such a big deal tonight. How is it that we made it out to be so hard, when all we had were chances, unending chances that fell into our laps as we turned them down, 'cause we didn't know which way to go. And I shiver as I try to keep everything on the up and away. My teeth chatter, it's cold here without direction, and it doesn't seem so complicated now. Not such a big deal, so complicated now. Now that those wounds have healed, it doesn't seem like such a big deal tonight. So was it so hard to raise your voice just a little? Would you have died rather than give him a piece of your mind? Or did you know from the start that it couldn't be so complicated? You're standing up slowly for yourself. You no longer need the scaffold of me, and I'm happy to tear that down. 'Cause I'd rather see you standing up freely. Don't lean for him, never lean for me. To fall underwhelmed so easily, 'cause now you can stand up for yourself. And it doesn't seem so complicated now, not such a big deal. So complicated now, now that the wounds have healed. It doesn't seem like such a big deal tonight. And it doesn't seem so complicated now, not such a big deal. So complicated now, now that those wounds have healed. It doesn't seem like such a big deal tonight. No, not tonight. Tonight. That was Standing. I'm Krisis with a K. This is Crushing Krisis Live, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for watching.